To be radically honest, upon further reflection, it has come to my attention that I'm no longer able to spend time with your friend group because I find them to be insufferable and, quite frankly, toxic.
Since we all love some trickle-down therapy, here's what my therapist said to me today.
This is the core wound of complex PTSD.
I just had therapy and my therapist said something that actually blew my mind.
My mental health takes are not specifically tailored to you.
Hey, did you do the dishes? You were supposed to. Hey, sorry for interrupting. Is there a chance you didn't do the dishes? Excuse me, but do I have permission to initiate a constructive dialogue? Humility is one of my love languages, and since you are therefore filling my intimacy bucket, I will thus allow it. If you'll permit this observation, I happen to notice the dishes were undone when it was your responsibility to do so, which triggers feelings of invalidation and destructive withdrawal. I'm sorry, but I'm currently unable to let down the emotional barrier.
Bro, you every time we do these episodes, like, I think I know things, and now I'm just, like, fucked up. We don't need to become the therapist.
Bitch, what I was trying to say is this situation got me so wet and so dry at the same time. Exactly.
What's up, bitches? Welcome back to another episode of So Wet, So Dry. I'm one of your hosts, Fiji, like the island, like the water. I'm literally allergic to the planet, and I work in social media and marketing.
And I'm your other host, Autumn, like the season. I messaged my delusional crush this weekend, and it did not go well. And I work in entertainment. If you guys are new here, what we do on So Wet, So Dry is we explore duality through deep diving topics about sex, relationships, and personal identity, all where internet trends and reality collide. We do post polls on our Instagram every single week for upcoming episodes, so y'all can submit a story, answer our polls, and that is always on our Instagram at So Wet So Dry. So make sure you're following. And whatever platform y'all are on right now, please stop and take a second and subscribe or follow. Like the episode, leave a comment. We would love to hear what y'all think, and we would love to have you in our community of confused pussies.
Yes, and today we are deep diving therapy speak. But before we get into that, we're going to start the episode as we always do, talking about what we're so wet and so dry about in this very moment. But if you guys don't give a fuck, if you're tuning in for the very first time just about this topic, we promise we won't take it personally. If you want to skip forward to the next timestamp, we will catch you in the episode. So I will go first. This week, I'm so wet about just more literature art events. Yesterday, I went to...
No, for real.
You've been
on it, bro.
I've been on it. I've been out in the daytime, like Party Girl Who. Like, I went to Artists in the Afternoon. It was called Write for Our Lives. And there were some, like, adult speakers, writers, advocates. There were also, like, youth advocates, writers. It was really cool. I talked to some people, networked. I bought 3 books, so I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to do a little show.
No,
okay?
Please do it. Please.
Okay, and I'll link them all in the bottom.
Yeah,
so this is Eyes of the Beholders. It's life stories of African-American women, and the one that I met is Doris Thomas right here. So it's all women aged 55 to 93. So they've seen some shit, been through some shit, and their like goal is to share stories with like younger people. So I thought that was really interesting because, you know, we're always deep diving like the internet. I want to hear from like older people. So that's my goal with this one.
So important.
And Doris Thomas had like such good style. She was 83 years old and she looked incredible.
Oh my God. In the picture you sent me.
No. That's a different one. I'm going to get to her.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, right. So this one, I feel like you would love this one. It's called Femtales.
Ooh.
And it's the rewriting of 3 fairy tales, but it's lesbian sapphic literature.
No.
Yes. It's by Anne Shade. She is super cool. I sat next to her daughter, who is also like super nice. So yeah, Femtales.
I need to get that.
I'm passing it to you next.
Okay, after you read it.
And then the last one, it is huge, but I love the cover, like super thick. This is the one that I sent you the picture with. So this is by Tracy McDaniels, and it's Transitions, Memoirs of a Transsexual Woman. And she's a 2-time survivor of domestic violence, which you guys know is really important to me as a survivor of DV as well. And she's also a transgender woman and the founder of Juxtaposed Center for Transformation, Incorporated in Atlanta, Georgia. She's been to the White House. She's done a bunch of stuff in Hollywood. Like, she is really that bitch. So I'm very excited to read these 3. I still have Drew Offwallow's book and the Audre Lorde one.
Dude,
so, like, my reading list is insane. I need to stop. Like, no more events for now. But it was great. So I had a great time. Highly recommend. And, yeah.
No, I'm not going to lie, though. The Femmes fairy tale, that one takes priority. You need to see what that's talking about.
It's some fiction. I don't usually read fiction as much anymore.
Right.
You know, but
yeah, I love that. I love fiction. That's like totally up my alley, and she knows it. Okay, I love that for you so much. I'm jealous. I wish I could go with you, honestly. That would be like such a great thing for us to do together. I am so wet just simply about Sabrina Carpenter's new album, guys. I know everyone's like, woo-hoo, but y'all, like, I've, not to be any type of way, but, like, I've loved her forever, and, like,
you're like, I'm the first.
I'm not the first, I'm definitely not the first, but she's been, like, a hidden gem for so many people, and now it's, like, so amazing to see her get the recognition, and I just think she's so funny and sassy, and just, like, herself. But my top 3, obviously, Taste, like the video, that one, like,
that one's good.
Like, I swear to God, she put drugs in this album, because I don't know why, it just hit so hard. My second favorite is Good Graces, and then my third favorite right now is Bed Chem. It's so good. Bed Chem, like chemistry, like Bed Chem.
Oh,
yeah, I know.
Okay,
I say it kind of weird. But yeah, I'm just so wet about that, like literally on repeat. I'm obsessed. You guys should go listen if you haven't. And if you don't fuck with her, then no, I'm not going to say that.
I feel like we've been talking about Sabrina Carpenter like so much lately. Like, she's having a moment, but I should really listen to the album.
Because it's like, obvious, it's everyone's saying it's like Sabrina Carpenter's bringing back pop music, which I don't really know like what that means, but like that's been a common rhetoric everywhere. Like, there hasn't been like a good pop album or whatever.
Her and Chapel, and I mean, Charlie XCX is like hyper pop, I guess.
Yeah, it's like British pop.
Yeah.
UK.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, as for So Dry, well, one, guys, I'm like feeling kind of like shit today the past couple days. Like, the allergy count is high. Yeah. My allergies, like the tension headache is so bad. But on top of that, I was feeling not great, and I wasn't really realizing that it was allergies. I was thinking that it was cigarettes. And also, like, I've just been thinking a lot about...
That's why you texted me?
Well, no, but I'm getting closer to the journey of quitting. Like, I'm recognizing, I think I've taken big steps in recognizing that I am addicted, because I feel like before I would just be like, it sounds so ridiculous.
That was the question
but like,
before. It's okay.
Yeah, but it would just be like, oh, it's part of me. It's part of my life. Like, it's what I do. But like lately I've been like, I'm addicted and this is a problem, which is a big step in me realizing, like, you know what I'm saying? So I joined like the Reddit group about it. I was reading people's stories. Like, some of them were very motivational. Some of them were terrifying, like getting depressed after you quit and like gaining weight and all of those things. But other people, like 3 years out, said they felt so much better. They like coughed up all the bad shit in their lungs, like all of this stuff. So
Jesus.
I don't know. I'm like, I found this book that they all recommended by like Erin Carr, I think, and it talks about the emotional dependency on them.
Yeah.
Which, like, I always know I've had, but I think I need to, like, because they make you more stressed, whereas, like, I think they make you less stressed.
Dude, it's, like, literally the same with weed. Like, I kid you not. And, like me and, like, we started smoking cigarettes, like, almost kind of together. I mean, you kind of started in London, but, like, we used to, like that, and I felt the exact same way, and it's like, I did quit smoking, but I smoke spliffs, like, so it's like, did I really quit? Like, I still smoke tobacco sometimes, but that is so, like, tea, because I really feel that. It's like, I was like, no, it's just what I do, like, it's creative, like, a bunch of artsy people smoke weed.
Right,
but I'm
it's
like,
my aesthetic.
But it does, it makes me 10 times more anxious, like, I'm shaky sometimes, and, like, realizing that it's an addiction is like scary, but I really feel like I can't go without it, and like it's expensive, like you have to pay for it, and so we could be on a journey together, honestly.
We should, because like going to these events has honestly been helping me, because I'm like, hyper conscious.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about even being in college, like I'm always looking for the exit and thinking about when my next cigarette is going to be. And I don't think about it as much when I'm home because I smoke indoors or I smoke on my balcony. But like the fact that I'm constantly like that is such anxiety.
Dude.
And then I smell like it and then I'm like hyper conscious of what people are going to think. But like when I'm out partying, everyone's smoking. So it's like me switching up my environment, I feel like is like
that is
showing
so
it more.
Thinking about when you're going to smoke next is so real.
And like we're not there yet, so I'm about to smoke one, but like
Yeah, I know. It's like not right now though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's baby steps, you know.
Right.
But
We're
I'm so
getting
proud
there.
of you. Like honestly, I've never heard you talk like that ever before in
Right.
my life.
It's
Like so I'm really proud of you.
Thanks, babe.
Okay, we're tangenting, so I'm gonna make it quick, but basically, guys, I'm just like so annoyed with myself, but I sent my delusional crush like a voice memo because
No, what'd you say?
I literally was like, hey.
Shut the fuck
It's
up.
like such a running bit. I feel like she's not even a real person. So it's like I just do it for
You
the
have a
plot.
parasocial relationship.
Yeah, so I was just like, hey, like whatever, like I know you probably think like I'm so
No.
I literally wanted to play it, but I was like, how do I play it from my phone? But I was
No,
like,
you should.
I was like,
Wait, do you have it? We could include it in the episode.
okay, we'll include it in the episode, but like if we don't, I was basically just like, I know you think I'm annoying, but like I honestly just want to say like, why aren't the lyrics on Spotify to your song? Because like I want to read them. And she was like, ha 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 ha, that's so sweet, like they're still processing. Oh, and I did say,
Whoa.
I was like, honestly, like, feel free to, like, ignore this, but, like, I talk, like, I said something so, okay, we're just gonna play it. Okay, I know you think I'm so annoying, but low-key, it's like a bit on my podcast that you're my delusional crush, so if you want to block me, just go ahead, but all I have to say is that I really need, like, the lyrics to be on Spotify to your songs. Like, why the fuck does it not do that? Like, is that like, I don't know what that is, but I want to look at the lyrics. Like, where are the lyrics? Like, I'll pay for them. Like, I want to read along. You know what I mean? Anyways, hope you have a great day. Just popping in to say one of your listeners is wanting the lyrics. So I don't know what we need to do, but I need that. So, okay. But guys, this is just to show you, like, I, like, actually need to be stopped. Like, I think I'm going to unfollow her and just, like, actually stop. Because it's getting bad.
But it's fun.
And I'm not
she
harassing
answered.
her. Right. And it's like, I actually am a fan. Maybe if I didn't know her, I wouldn't fuck with her music and, like, had this whole thing. But genuinely, her music is good. Okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to compliment that. She just
and you wanted
dropped
to see
a song.
the lyrics. But don't you feel like with a delusional crush, when I had a delusional crush that makes music, I would pull apart their lyrics and be like,
But here's the thing. If she responded and was like, oh my God, like your voice is so sexy. Like I'm trying to fuck. When can you meet up? Bro, I wouldn't go hang out with her. I'm going to be so honest.
I know.
And it's the fact that she's like not mean, but very like, okay, bitch. I'm like I want you more.
Yeah.
So, like, I just want to make that clear, bitch. Like, if I saw her in person, she wanted me, that's a different story. But if she asked me to hang out, like, I wouldn't go. I would be like, no.
I feel like I would force you to go.
Yeah, but, like, I wouldn't. Okay, let's get into the episode, guys.
Okay, let's get into the episode. So first, guys, I just want to give a disclaimer. We are talking a lot about therapy speak, all of these mental health things in this episode. We are talking about it from a cultural, internet, friends, family, relationship dynamics perspective. We are not talking about it from like an actual mental health, like we're here to cure you perspective. So I just want you guys to know we're going to bring in language from therapists, like quotes from them and all of that in here. But if you guys need real mental health resources, I'll link some in the description. Please seek therapy and help in that way. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to do any of that stuff. This is purely media criticism and all of that.
And we're not in that field and literally never will be.
Yeah, exactly. We are not social workers. We are not therapists. We are just humans on this planet that like to research shit and dissect it. So, with that being said, we're going to talk about what the fuck is therapy speak, because I was a little bit confused at first.
Same.
I wasn't quite sure. But therapy speak is when people use psychological, therapeutic, or mental health language in day-to-day conversations. So for this episode, we're kind of going to dissect a lot of the biggest articles about therapy speak, and they kind of started in like 2022 to 2023 and 2024. So it's an ongoing conversation.
Right.
But we're going to work these articles in throughout to hear what other people have to say. And one of the ones I like the most is from The Guardian, and it's called That's Triggering, Is Therapy Speak Changing the Way We Talk About Ourselves by Eleanor Morgan. And she says,
if the language used on the internet is a reliable indicator, we're more psychologically enlightened than ever. We discuss attachment styles like the weather. We joke about our coping mechanisms. We project or are projected onto. We shun toxic people. We catastrophize and ruminate. We diagnose or are diagnosed. OCD, depression, anxiety, ADHD, narcissism. We make, break, or struggle to hold boundaries. We practice self-care. We know how to spot gaslighting. We're tuned into our emotional labor. We're triggered. We're processing our trauma. We're doing the work. The language of therapy room has long permeated popular culture. Common terms like repression, denial, slip of the tongue, hysteria, and inner child all lead back to Freud. Of course it does, bro.
mm-hmm.
But over the last decade or so, with the vast expansion of social media networks, a new seemingly sophisticated language sits on modern society's tongue. Some call it therapy speak or psychobabble. But despite its prevalence, the language is divisive.
Platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok pull in colossal viewing numbers on these abstract concepts. Search gaslighting on YouTube, and the top result, 10 examples of what gaslighting sounds like, has 3.3 million views. On TikTok, the hashtag narcissism has 3.8 billion views. Search triggered on Instagram, and a tidal wave of multimedia content appears. You can scroll through 10 minutes and still be fed lists, memes, and vlogs. Even if only a small portion of viewers take the language they're absorbing online into their offline conversations, we can still imagine how easily it seeps into the public consciousness, particularly among young people, the main demographic for platforms like TikTok. So these numbers, like these stats and stuff, this article is from 2023, I think, so we can only imagine that those numbers have gone up.
To talk about this because it's literally ruining relationships.
Since we all love some trickle-down therapy, here's what my therapist said to me today that had me rendered so speechless, my jaw was basically on the ground like they talk about in books.
This is the core wound of complex PTSD. I'm a childhood therapist, and I've been discussing the impact of traumatic emotional neglect.
Well, it's not going to be that way forever. And it may be the way it is right now, but it's not going to be that way forever.
I just had therapy, and my therapist said something that actually blew my mind. And if you have been in therapy for a while now, maybe you've experienced this too.
Hello, I'm Jeff Gunther, licensed professional counselor. I have some important things to say that I need you to hear if you're gonna watch my videos. I don't know you personally, which means I'm not an expert on you. My mental health takes are not specifically tailored to you. Sure, I'm a licensed therapist, but I'm not your licensed therapist.
Right.
But I wanna plug in some terms that are thought of as therapy speak. So trauma, gaslighting, boundaries, attachment styles, toxic relationships, triggered, codependent, abusive, OCD, holding space, narcissistic, no contact, inner child, projecting, also emotional labor, weaponizing competence, all of these terms, which we've definitely heard before. So we asked you guys, do you think people overuse therapy speak like these terms? And 78% of you guys said yes, and 22% said no.
Damn.
And this is kind of the common feeling among people, is that like we're using this language too much. But I want to ask you and talk about it a little bit. When have you seen these terms used? What's your experience with them? Do you use them yourself? Let's get into it.
Yeah, so I'm like, honestly, I voted in the polls and I was like, yeah, people do. But now I'm like, I guess not. Like, the most I see it is on TikTok. Like, I don't really have that many, like, you know, people I'm chilling with on a regular basis. But I feel like online is when I hear it the most. And sometimes, like, I think it's good for people to, like, know these terms. Like, I don't think it should be a secret. But I do think when, like we always talk about with TikTok and everything, it just goes too far. And then if you, like, And the diagnosing each other is horrible. But I feel like the biggest one I see on TikTok a lot is the narcissism one.
Yeah.
And the inner child, it's like, well, that's more like good though. Like, I don't know how you could really fuck that up. But I feel like narcissism, I see a lot on TikTok, toxic relationships, obviously, attachment styles, gaslighting for sure. I remember like when it was like probably like 2022, like my roommate like didn't know what gaslighting was. And like she asked me what is it, and I explained it, and she's like, oh, so like what you do to me sometimes? Bro, the way I fucking like, I was like, goodbye. Good fucking bye.
No.
So I feel like I've definitely experienced it in like close friendships and relationships, but the most I feel like where all the feelings come from of like, oh, we're overusing it, we're not using it properly, is because of like all the discourse online, specifically on TikTok, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because we're going to get into gaslighting a little bit more, but the actual term gaslighting I found came from like a movie. It wasn't actually from therapy. And then they started using it in therapy language. It was like a movie in like the 1950s or something, which is kind of weird to think about.
I honestly felt like gaslighting, yes, it is therapy speak, but I more like discovered that on TikTok, because like I've been in therapy on and off since I was literally 12 years old. I kid you not. So like I know like therapy language in terms of like the therapist I've had in being in therapy. But gaslighting, I felt like was just something our generation was like, yeah, we're gonna take this one and run with it. Like, I don't think I've ever, like, my therapist never said, like, oh, he's gaslighting you. Maybe she did. I don't know. But I really do think that's, like, generation shit. And I feel like a lot of times, like, when you're in, like, a fight with someone that you, like, love, whether it's, like, a friend or a loved one, like, using these terms and, like, putting these terms on someone else, like, does tend to, like, make us feel better. Where it's like, oh, well, that's just their blank acting up kind of thing. Or they're a narcissist, you know? Which, like, sometimes they are. But I feel like, why does that, like, make us feel better to, like, put that on them? And then we don't, like, acknowledge, like, what we're doing in that. And not talking about abusive relationships and shit like that. But, like, more just, like, friendships and, like, casual, more so relationships. I don't know why that makes us feel better. It's like putting another woman down makes you feel better. Like, we like to, like, put these terms on other people, but no one's going on TikTok saying like, I am a narcissist, you know, like that's very more or less common. So it's like a lot of times it's putting it on other people.
Yeah. And like how the article said, like people are more psychologically enlightened than ever. Like I feel like because of like these, and we're going to get into like how deep it goes, but like because we have more access to learning about like these terms and all of those things, they become more casual because people learn a term and they're like, oh, like your roommate, oh, this is what gaslighting is. So now maybe next time you say something or whatever, she's like, oh, you're gaslighting me.
Yeah, for sure.
And we can get into like if that's right or not, because like the thing with some of these terms is like, is it gaslighting, like, or is it something else? Like, because some of the context of these terms only exist in like abusive situations that only exist in like particular mental health situations. But I've noticed also like this language is used in a like funny way too, like a humorous way. Like people will be like, oh my God, is that my trauma?
It's not
Or like
serious.
people will be like, chill, like I'm triggered. Like people will be kind of like joking and stuff sometimes too.
Yeah.
Which is like kind of interesting to think about because like it's become so common that like it's used in therapy for like actual therapeutic uses. People are looking for answers on algorithms and in podcasts and all of that. And then people are also using it to like joke.
Yeah.
So we have all these different uses where it's like, what is the actual meaning of it?
Being triggered is not like fun, you know? And we all have that feeling where it's like a song comes on, you're like, oh, I'm triggered. But it's like, no, you just like had a bad memory. Or whatever. And so it's like over time, that's not good. And it's also like the rise of social media is like the rise of like there's mental health influencers, there's therapist influencers. And again, I don't think they should go away necessarily, but it is just like kind of a new thing. It's like even if you're not on therapy, you have access to therapists like spitting out all of their tips and all of these things like whenever you want. But
Yeah.
it is real, and I feel like honestly, it's kind of corny, like the I'm triggered thing. I'm like, why do we have to take something that's like,
supposed to be used in this
and
way
I've said
use
it,
in
like
such
I'm not,
I mean, me
like I've
too.
said it so much.
I definitely have.
But
And
I'm
that's
like,
the
I
thing
don't
is
want
like,
to.
and I think especially like Gen X boomers and stuff like that, a lot of them, because they didn't have the same type of access to these algorithms and stuff, are looking at young people using these terms and are kind of like, what are you doing? Like, this used to be like for whatever. It's not clicking as much versus for us, it's much more casual.
Oh, hey, I'm glad I caught you. Listen, the movie that we went to last night, you told me it was going to be funny, and I didn't really laugh that much, so I just need you to know that that is gaslighting. You gaslit me, and I will not be Venmoing you for a ticket because I'm learning to stand in my power. Wow, okay, it really feels like you are projecting right now. You are projecting your need for me to not leave the kitchen a mess onto me right now, and that is completely violating my boundaries. Yeah, I know I agreed to be there for the meeting, but for you to get upset with me for not showing up really feels like codependency. Wait, you want me to pay you back the money that you gave me to borrow? That is very toxic. And if you ask me again, I will be forced to go no contact. Wow, okay, have you considered that my inner child maybe needs to be mean right now? Like, I was bullied as a child, so now my inner child needs to bully someone. So for you to tell me that I'm not allowed to say that your dye job makes you look like Marjorie Taylor Greene and give you a wedgie, that is basically you being a narcissist.
It was so fun tonight. I'll see you this weekend at my housewarming, right?
That's what I was. To be radically honest, upon further reflection, it has come to my attention that I'm no longer able to spend time with your friend group because I find them to be insufferable and, quite frankly, toxic. In order for us to spend more time together, it's going to have to be one-on-one outside of them.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did someone say something?
No, it's just their vibes. It's just their vibes.
Okay.
So next we're going to get into a little bit more about 4 of these terms. And then after that, we're going to get into examples of them playing out in real life. But we have this article from HuffPost. It's 6 therapy terms you're probably misusing. We're only going to do 4, but we're going to start with gaslighting.
So it says that gaslighting is one of the most commonly misused terms according to experts. It's a manipulation tactic often seen in abusive relationship dynamics in which one person gradually makes the other question their own judgment, memories, emotions, and reality in order to maintain the upper hand in the relationship. It's a serious issue with significant psychological consequences, so it's important for folks to understand its true meaning. New York City therapist Kenu Jackson of the Expansive Group told HuffPost. But these days, some people are far too quick to slap a gaslighter label on anyone who disagrees with their point of view. If one partner sees something from a different perspective, it doesn't mean they're gaslighting you. Florida therapist Amy Morin, author of 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do and the host of the Mentally Stronger podcast, told HuffPost. Sometimes behaviors that are labeled gaslighting are actually genuine disagreements, misunderstandings, or typical relationship conflicts, Jackson added. And a listener actually submitted a story about gaslighting and said, I feel like gaslighters learned the term gaslight and now use it on their victims. Jesus. Yeah. Gaslighting is huge. Like, I honestly feel like it's maybe, if not the biggest one that people talk about and like say happens to them the most. But I do agree with like the therapist. Like, it is important to know the real meaning. Like, as much as it's like funny sometimes, like as the more and more you joke and everyone jokes, it takes on a new meaning, and then you're gonna get confused to what it really is. Whereas, like, if someone's consistently gaslighting you, like, that's a serious problem. Like she said, it's, like, most often happens in abusive relationship dynamics. So whether it's family, whoever.
Yeah.
But, yeah, gaslighting. So it's kind of like, can you, or no, we're going to get into examples.
I can give you an example, because this is one that I kind of am like, I don't know sometimes.
Like, because I forgot because of all the bullshit.
Exactly. And I'm like, I've had this happen at work in situations where it's like, oh, I feel like my boss or someone is like gaslighting me, or like it's something like that. And then I've also had it in like past non-abusive, non-toxic relationships where we're talking about like a political issue or something like that, and they think very opposite than me, and then I'm like, oh, they're gaslighting me. But then it's not that they're gaslighting me, it's that their experience and their information and like what they know is different than me. So like we're disagreeing and we're seeing it from different perspectives, and it feels you could mistake it for gaslighting because you're like, I know this to be true, but they know this to be true. And so it's just a gap in between, and that's not gaslighting. But what actual gaslighting is like when I was in my abusive relationship where like there was a scenario that's like very clearly one thing, and he would tell me like it's completely different and like warp your reality into believing like one thing that he would do a lot when I was in this abusive relationship is like, you're being a hoe, like you're flirting with these people, you're cheating on me, you're texting. And I wasn't doing any of those things, but he would say it so much to the point where I would be hyper like conscious, hyper aware and thinking that I really was a hoe and that I really was cheating and flirting and doing all these things, when it would be something like asking someone to switch shifts with me. Like stuff like that. So like that's where it's like a little bit different. Like could there be, I think there's smaller forms of gaslighting that can happen like at work maybe, or in like your friendships or something like that, where it's like a little bit manipulative, but like actual gaslighting I think is more of a like ongoing process.
Yeah. Because what I'm thinking too is like say like your man gets home and you're like, oh, where were you? And they like, and you like know somehow, like maybe they posted a story by accident and you like already know the truth, but they like tell you, like they convince you that something else isn't the truth. They gaslight you into it going their way.
Yeah, when they're warping like what's real, when they know. But if you just disagree with someone or have different points of view, that's not gaslighting, because like you just see things from different perspectives.
You said something that like hurt somebody's feelings. They confronted you about it and you were like, no, like that wasn't about you though. And you like lied to like not hurt their feelings. Like what's that?
I don't know.
Because I feel like that is gaslighting.
Kind of gaslighting, because if you did something,
I have done that.
Yeah.
Like I'll be so for real. In a void to not hurt someone, I've definitely done that before.
But the argument is that it could hurt someone more because you're making them not believe their own reality.
Yeah. 1,000. Which is, guys, I'm so sorry. Like I feel guilty about it, but like I've probably done it like maybe like 3 tops. Like I don't just go around doing it. I think
all of us have. There's a difference. Like I think that like, when you have best intentions in mind and stuff like that, it's different than being like an abusive person. So next we're gonna get into triggered.
Yeah.
I got you, babe. A trigger is something that sets off a strong emotional reaction, often related to a past trauma or distressing experience. Atlanta clinical psychologist Zainab Delawala told HuffPost. A trigger can take someone out of the present moment and transport their mind to the past, leading them to re-experience the trauma and its aftermath, she said. For example, someone who lived through a house fire might experience a flashback or panic attack when they smell smoke or hear a fire alarm beeping. But now people often use trigger in casual conversations as a way to describe any situation that elicits a negative reaction, however mild. Delawala said, adding, people tend to misuse the term and say they are triggered by commonplace experiences that they simply do not like. Some folks may say they're triggered as a tactic to end a conversation. It's often used to get someone else to stop discussing a subject simply because you don't want to address an issue, Warren said. And this is something that I've had like real life, like experience with, and it was so confusing for me at the time because I do have trauma and PTSD around my abusive relationship. There would be moments in the last situation that I was in where I would get triggered because he raised his voice, and he was not like toxic, abusive, like none of those things, but he would like raise his voice or like say a certain thing, and it's like I don't know how to describe the feeling other than like I I leave my body and I completely shut down. Like it feels like everything is shutting down and I just need to leave the room and I need to go smoke a cigarette, take a walk, like whatever, because like, yeah, because I'm not like there, like I just shut down.
It makes me
and
want
so
to
I would
cry, literally.
It's awful, but it's like a trauma response. And it was really difficult for me because I don't think before we had started the relationship, I had the language or really enough therapy or understanding to explain what was happening or explain how that affected me. And him being someone who like didn't experience this type of like trigger issue that I had, was looking at it from the way that this therapist is talking about it as like, oh, you just have a negative thing that you don't want to talk about. And so you're just shutting down the conversation, and not that it's an actual trigger, because I think it's become so common that people hear, oh, you're triggered, and they don't take it as seriously. Right. So I think that's one of the dangerous. That's what's so dangerous about it, because it's like, no, like I've definitely used, oh, I'm triggered about things that are just, you know, I'm not.
Like a fork I didn't like.
Fucking, yeah, 100%.
Oh, I'm triggered. It's ugly.
We all have done that, because like we found this word to use to apply to this negative feeling that we have kind of. But the emotional reaction that I would have to something like that versus something I just don't like is completely different. And I think the common use of it is kind of scary.
And it's like interesting. There's so much to say about this, honestly. Like, and because there's triggered, and then there's also PTSD, which are like two different things. And even we always talk about, you're like, oh, watch the show. I'm like, it'll be too triggering. And it's like, I don't even know if like that's right. Like, I think it could lead to potentially me being triggered. But it's not like that show is like, I don't know. Like, I've really only experienced one time where I was like, borderlining PTSD, where like I had like some sort of flashback where it like went dark and I smelt the strip club. Yeah, that was the part that scared me the most. Like, it smells so distinct, and it's not gross, guys, but like it smelled like something, and that was like so scary. But like everything else that's like triggered me in some sense that has to do with sex work, it's like I don't even know if I've been fully using that correctly, because it's some of it is just bad memories. Some of it's not all so deep trauma. Like, some of it's just like fuck shit that happened that like was not trauma for me, maybe someone else, but it's just a bad memory, which is completely different. And I think it's good that like people are, you know, using the word in one sense, but I think it's lost the meaning. And I think that is so dangerous, and no one really talks about that. Like, I just looked it up real quick. There's like a podcast called Triggered. Like, I know I've seen that before. Like, it's always like triggered on like thumbnails and things like that. And I don't want to demonize people joking about it, because sometimes it is just like funny, silly, and it's okay. And like, our generation does love to like take kind of dark things and like make it funny. Like, honestly, that is a thing.
Gen Z for sure.
For sure, because it's like we're like finding out all this new information about ourselves, and like
a lot of stuff that we like can't really. I
like
mean,
the pandemic,
like Trump being president.
Bro, we are.
Yeah, there's a lot that's gone on that we are just like, everything feels
no
kind of
graduation,
hopeless.
like
all of that stuff. It kind of makes us feel like, oh, like we have this nihilistic attitude about a lot of stuff, and just like, oh, well, like mental health, like it's all bad, but like whatever, like I'm gonna joke about it.
And we have more access to like knowledge like than ever before, like literally ever. Like, obviously there's Google and the internet, but it's like TikTok deep dive shit like no one else. Like, honestly, and you have to be careful with the sources and media literacy, but you can really find out a lot. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to demonize it, but I am seeing it like as a potential problem. And like, I feel like next time I say that, like I might check myself, just because like, just for me personally, it's like, I want to know the real meaning of words. Like, I don't want to take it too far myself. Yeah. But I'm not judging anyone at the same time, because I get it. Like, it's dark, you know, and probably 9 times out of 10, the people joking about it, like, do have actual trauma, PTSD, and that's why they are hopefully, kind of.
Yeah, I'm kind of iffy because even
So-
like our trauma dumping episode, and we'll get into that a little bit, and we have trauma next, but like what is trauma, what's not, and it's, you can't really tell someone like that's not trauma, like that's not okay to do because everyone's experiences are different. But I would say just, and even for myself, because it's weird because I do have triggers and PTSD, but I also have used it in senses where it's not. So I think like the best thing is, like you said, like next time you feel that feeling or you feel like you want to say that, like really reflect on like, okay, like, am I triggered or am I just experiencing a negative emotion because like I don't want to talk about this thing or I don't like this situation or whatever.
But don't be mad at yourself or like give yourself the ick, because honestly, it's like so hard. It's like it really is everywhere, and like
we can't be politically correct all the time with this type of stuff. Like it's
because
complex.
We're not therapists.
Right, exactly. So next we have trauma, and quote, in therapy, trauma refers to a deeply distressing or disturbing experiences that overwhelm a person's ability to cope, involving harm or a threat of harm to life or limb, DeWalla says. It can lead to long-lasting emotional, psychological, and physical effects. However, in therapy speak, the word trauma is often applied more liberally to describe any difficult or challenging situation, she said, relating to the term, quote, trauma bonding, which is often used inaccurately. In reality, it refers to a phenomenon in which, quote, deep emotional attachments form between a victim and abuser as a result of enduring cycles of intense traumatic experiences or abuse followed by positive reinforcement, Jackson said. This is a manipulation tactic resting on an imbalance of power within the relationship, he said. This is quite different from the way you typically see trauma bonding discussed on social media. Online, it's often used to describe two people connecting over a shared difficult experience, like working for a challenging boss or going through a divorce.
Bro, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was confused about that one because that is so true. It's never like that online. It really is like two bitches met and talked about how, you know, society's fat phobic, and they were like, but I'm like, so what, like, when I was dating that man, like, while I was stripping and, like, going through all this shit, like, he wasn't abusive towards me, like, at all. Like, he was super respectful. I felt super lucky, like, whatever. I felt safe, but with him. But since I, like, went through traumatic, like, things and he was always there, I did feel some sort of attachment to him because of that. But it's not trauma bonding because he wasn't experiencing any trauma. And also we weren't, you know, we didn't have abusive relationship dynamics with positive reinforcement and all of that. So what's that? Just a shitty situation? You know what I mean? But
yeah, I don't know. And I feel like that's something where it's like, it would be worth like talking to a therapist and all of that about, because I'm not even sure.
Right.
Like, I'm like, arguably, because it's like, if you do go through a traumatic experience with someone and then it leads to a codependent relationship, which is also a therapy term, it all gets confusing because like we think of trauma bonding as like, oh, we went through this experience together. Like we've said we trauma bonded before at the strip club and stuff and codependent, but like arguably we didn't.
We
so
just
it's a little bit
it at the same time as parallel lines holding hands.
Exactly. We went through things together. And this is one, like, I had, like, a while ago, I was in a job and with this person, and
so vague. Okay.
I know. But I had a boss that, he was, like, just not a great boss. I could argue that he was gaslighting us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, I'm like, did it really, like, I don't know. I feel like having been through an abusive relationship, my like idea of what these things are is a lot like the bar is up here and like this doesn't feel like anything.
Dude.
Like I will deal with a lot more until I'm like, this is abuse.
Which is not always a good thing.
Which is not always a good thing
okay.
because there are like, it doesn't have to be abuse for you to like not want to deal with a fucking situation.
And you know that, yeah.
And I know that, and that's been a journey. But so he was like doing these things. He was also like borderline sexual harassing. I don't even know if I want to use that term because it was just like more, he would say a lot of things about like my looks. He would say like weird, like, you know, just as older men do.
He was.
And I thought it was weird, but I also like in that situation, like I've had this happen so many times, I just kind of like laugh it off and uncomfortable. And after a while, I just like would just be silent when he said something and just keep it like fucking pushing. But this person that I worked with, Like, and I don't know what this person, I'm gonna say she's a girl. I feel like that's important. I don't know what she's been through. So like, I don't want to like put things on someone because maybe she has been through abuse. Maybe she has been through like sexual trauma and all of that. All of these things that he said were catered towards me. And the way that she would talk about, we would be on the phone, this situation, she was like, oh, he's gaslighting us. Like, me and her, she was like, we're trauma bonding. Like, she would use a lot of therapy speak. Yeah, and I know she was in therapy at the time, too. She was like, she would say all these things. And then there was a point in this, like, saga where she wanted to address the sexual, quote-unquote, sexual harassment with the owner of the company about the boss. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then she persisted. And I would say at this point, guys, I was triggered because in my abusive relationship, there were a lot of situations where the cops came and he was arrested and it was like out of my control. Like it was the state versus him. And I was consistently encouraged to report things and encouraged to do the legal process when I didn't want to. And her pressuring me to like do this was putting me back in that same feeling. And she literally said to me, let's not have Stockholm syndrome about this situation. And I did say to her, I was like, I'm sorry if I do have Stockholm syndrome because I've been in an abusive relationship and I don't like think this is that and I don't feel comfortable. And she just kept pushing it. So to me, that's kind of an example of like weaponized therapy speak and like using it as controlled when like she didn't know my situation and like was also trying to like push me in this direction. And I didn't have until I did this episode, like I wasn't completely thinking through like what that was, but it felt like weaponized therapy speak.
Yeah, I just had to look up Stockholm syndrome because I didn't want to interrupt you. It's a coping mechanism to a captive or abusive situation people develop. Okay. They develop
so
positive
it's
feelings.
when you like put you put your abuser on a pedestal and you like still love them and like all of that stuff and you like stay in the situation.
It's so hard too because it's like she probably thought she was like, you know, doing the right thing.
She thought she was doing feminine stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just like you already have a bad situation where someone is like making these comments at you and you're trying to just like do your job and be like, this is just my work. This is not my identity, like whatever. And honestly, as past sex workers, it's like, you know, like old
I'm
men
used to this.
saying
This is nothing
shit
to
is
me.
nothing new.
It's like it happens all the fucking time.
It's not
I'm not saying it's okay.
Right, but it's like, my God. And it's like you don't want to feel uncomfortable, even more uncomfortable where you work if you say something and it's like, now you have to deal with
risk.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like then, especially in work
But that's what makes me think she doesn't understand, though.
Yeah, I don't think she does.
You know, because it's like, that's not even a factor. And I get that, like, other people at work feel uncomfortable when they see a boss making creepy comments towards someone else. But at the end of the day, it really is, like, it's that person's call, you know? Like, at the end of the day,
and technically, like, in HR, like, whatever training, like, she could report it if she wanted to. Like, you are supposed to, like, even if you don't experience it and you see it, you can, by, like, the HR rules of sexual harassment, you can report it.
And you should.
And she
like,
could
I'm
have
not gonna
done that,
say
and she should have. But, like, for her to be having those conversations with me,
right, just
me
do
to
it. Just do it.
If you're going to do it, like, do it and don't have me involved in it. And then when I come into the situation, like, I would probably say I didn't want to deal with it and, like, it is what it is, whatever. I would deal with it when I got there. But to have the conversations with me and tell me, you have Stockholm syndrome, you need to do this, like, da-da-da. And also, like, the way she was seeing that situation versus the way that I was seeing it. Like, we both have different life experiences, you know? Like, again, like, the bar for me is up here. The bar for her is here. I've been a fucking stripper. Like, to me, those types of comments, are they annoying and do they make it difficult to get my corporate work stuff done a lot of the times? Yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to me, being in the situation of having to report things, then also I've been subpoenaed before. Like, I've had to pay bail bills. Like, you know, like that just like I don't want to have to then sit in meetings to talk about this and then risk me being fired. And like, that's just where I'm coming from with it. And I'm not saying it's
everyone's
wrong.
going to come from different points, and like yours is like beyond valid, bro. And it's like, I get if she wanted to push you maybe once, be like, oh, Fiji, maybe just like reconsider, yada yada. Okay, done. But like the ongoing, even after you disclose
I said
that
no.
you've been through shit, and she's just like, no, it's Stockholm syndrome. Like that's crazy, dude.
You're diagnosing me, and that's like crazy.
Have you ever heard of the term like trauma drama?
No.
So it's like my mom is a social worker. Both my moms are actually. And like all their friends are too, whatever. And like they've talked about it before. It's kind of like when someone just kind of goes on and on about their trauma and it's kind of like their whole thing.
Their whole
or it's
identity.
Just even it's like someone else, it's like something like it's kind of hard to explain, but even if someone hasn't gone through anything, but they're just like always talking about it or like trying to like overly make sure someone's okay, and it's just like that's the spotlight of everything. So there's a lot going on with trauma. So I don't even know, dude. It's exhausting. It really is. But I feel like at the end of the day, same thing about triggered and gaslighting. It's so dangerous to lose what these words actually mean, because also you don't want to discredit someone that like actually, not to be like they actually have trauma, but it's like, you know, it's like you don't want to discredit that and make it so loose. Like all the words are loose. Like we are
need
loose
like more
as fuck, bro. It's like we can have different words. Like what's another word for? We should make a TikTok
like
and be
bad
like
experience.
trauma and in between bad experience. There's something that's in the middle.
We need something else where it's like not quite trauma, but it's not quite a bad experience.
It's
like
like
it has lasting effects, but
it's right in the middle. I don't know what that word could be, but we don't find out.
But yeah.
So moving on to the fourth one, which is boundaries. Setting boundaries is about honoring your own needs. It's not about controlling someone else's behavior. You might recall the alleged text messages between actor Jonah Hill and his former girlfriend, surfer Sarah Brady, that she posted on Instagram last year. In them, he asked her to stop surfing with men and posting bathing suit pictures on social media, among other things, under the guise of respecting his boundaries for romantic partnership. Boundaries are setting limits to what you are personally willing to do or tolerate, Toronto psychotherapist Britt Karen previously told HuffPost. A boundary is something that you have to determine for yourself, not something you can force someone else to comply with. Let's say you're an early riser who's in a relationship with a night owl. Your boundary might be that you decline social plans that begin after 8 p.m. so you can go to bed on time. But telling your partner that they can't go either, that's more of a rule than a healthy boundary.
So I told him to stop raising his voice at me. That's my boundary. That's not a boundary. That's a rule. What do you mean? A boundary guides your behavior. A rule guides someone else's behavior. Well, I don't like the sound of that. A rule sounds so restrictive. I think rules are relevant in relationships as well. A boundary would be more like, when you raise your voice at me, I will not be engaging in that conversation. How is that different? Well, because he can keep on yelling. You're not telling him not to yell. You're not controlling his behavior. You're saying what you are going to do in response to his behavior. Oh, okay. I see the difference there. Boundaries can seem like rules at times, but in reality, you're not controlling the other person's behavior. You're controlling your behavior, and the other person can act accordingly. I'm sure a lot of people get that confused. That's understandable. Think about it in terms of intent and power. When your intent is to change your behavior and to control your behavior, then it's a boundary. Okay, so if I say, if you yell at me, I'm not going to engage with you, and you need to sleep on the couch because I'm locking the door, then that's a boundary and a rule, right? That's actually more like a boundary for you and a threat for them. Whoa. We seem to have escalated a bit. How is that a threat and not a rule? Because when you have the power to exercise control over someone else's decision and you're trying to make them do something that you want, then it's a threat. Well, technically, isn't it their decision to abide by the rule, to decide to sleep on the couch? Okay, you don't have to be so loud with it. Threats are unhealthy because they make someone act out of fear, not due to their own choices, which is detrimental to their well-being and your relationship overall. Fine, so how do I get to a point? Or how do we get to a point where we have a shared understanding of how we engage in these situations? That would be a standard. Okay, so tell me more about the standard. Well,
Atlanta clinical psychologist Zainab Delawala acknowledged that while adding these terms to our vernacular does help destigmatize mental health struggles, using them incorrectly is actually a disservice to that goal. it dilutes the true meaning of those terms and concepts, she said. This is especially problematic for terms like trauma and triggers, as it hijacks the experiences of those who have actually experienced trauma and serves to minimize its true impact. See, that's what I said.
Exactly.
That's what I said. No, but boundaries is huge. Like, I'm sorry, but y'all I said, you know, I've gaslit before. This one, like, I feel like I'm kind of okay. Like,
I feel like I've done this one for sure.
Okay, yeah, maybe I have, like, with my ex-boyfriend. But it's, like, the easiest thing. It's, like, it's about you. It's not about anyone else. It's about your actions. Like, that TikTok was perfect. Like, I'm going to choose not to engage in the conversation if you yell. It's like, he can keep on yelling, you know?
But you're not.
And should you, like, but also in the heat of a moment, like, don't yell at me. Like, is that okay to say too? You know, it's all like, sometimes these things are never going to go perfect because we're not therapists. We're just human beings. But I do think the biggest thing I do see online is a lot of men talk about the boundary shit. And it's like the pictures on Instagram and that shit, like, that's my boundary or whatever. Like, and that really is a rule, and it's a fucked up rule, you know?
Right, because you can't force your boundaries on another person. They have to be things that you hold yourself to. And, like, I love that woman so much, too, because she literally reminds me of my therapist so much.
Really?
Like, down to the way she talks. Like, my therapist... And talking about boundaries is something that I've done, like, so much in therapy because I have not been good at telling myself, like, oh, I'm not going to do this. Like, I need to hold myself to the standard of, like, no, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to, like, sit here while you keep raising your voice. Like, I'm going to leave the room. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like when someone else is, like, doing this, you can't control what they do. And so I would always be like, oh, if I can't control what they do, then, like, I just can't control what they do. And so I'm just going to, like, exist in it. But it's like, no, I need to set a boundary for myself, and they can keep doing whatever they're doing, but I'm going to take myself over here, or I'm going to go do this. So, like, learning that has been, like, huge. I think it's a lifelong fucking process, but a lot of people do misuse it, and they're like, no, you're crossing my boundary, when they can just exit the situation.
And I like that she brought up standards too, because people do get those two confused as well a lot. Like, standards and boundary. It's like, if you're, you know, it's like corny to give an example, like, y'all get it, but it's interesting.
All right, next we're going to get into some examples of therapy speak. We're going to talk about friendships, we're going to talk about family, and then we're going to talk about couples and relationships. So first, let's start with friendship. And this article from Bustle is probably the most popular and most commonly known article. I think it was the first one. So it says, is therapy speak making us selfish? Boundaries are important, but our relationships require a touch more compassion than some online blueprints have to offer. So the first example starts with, last summer, Anna, 24, was dumped by a longtime friend over text. While making plans to meet up, the friend pivoted and told Anna she wanted to end their 5-year friendship. When Anna asked if it was something she did, her friend told her she wasn't comfortable answering and that there was no more room for discussion. Quote, I'm in a place where I'm trying to honor my needs and act in alignment with what feels right within the scope of my life, and I'm afraid our friendship doesn't seem to fit in that framework, the friend wrote. I can no longer hold the emotional space you've wanted me to, and I think the support you need is beyond the scope of what I can offer. Anna was hurt and frustrated. It felt like she was ending the friendship with an HR memo. She said, like, I would have hoped that you'd respect me enough to give me something more straightforward, or at the very least, more kind. Even if the friendship couldn't be saved, Anna says, she would have at least liked to have had the opportunity to respond. Quote, let it be more of a discussion. Like, let me say, okay, this is what I need. This is how I'm feeling. This is how you're feeling. Let's talk about this, she said. It felt super one-sided. So, this is the biggest one, and particularly that message where she's like, within the scope of my da-da-da, like, very therapy language going on. Like, this no longer fits in my life. Like, whatever, done. It's done. So I want to talk a little bit about, like, is this a boundary? Is this okay? Like, how the friend feels?
Yeah.
What are you kind of feeling?
I kind of see, like, obviously I feel bad for Anna, obviously, but I do feel like, I don't know, because I feel like every time my therapist, I'm like, because it's hard to cut someone off, whoever it is. Yeah. And whenever I've, like, felt like I needed to do that and I've gone to my therapist, they say some shit like that.
Yeah.
And then it's like you have to make it your own. But sometimes like I can't. I'm like, I just want you to literally tell me what I need to say because I don't know how. But I completely understand. Like, let it actually be a conversation. Like, let me at least have the space to say how I'm feeling. However, it's like, I get it that, like, y'all are friends. And, like, babe, I would literally never do this to you. Like, I don't want you to think this is the type of friend I am. But it's just, like, sometimes, like, you need to just, like, cut them off. And you don't want to hear what they have to say. And I do think when you have, like, a deep, intimate, like, female friendship like this, like, if you did that shit to me, I would be fucking furious. I would be fuming, bro. I would catch a flight
in a way.
No, but like that was like there was something like like I was like thinking the same thing. Like I didn't want to, and I probably never would have been the man to make that move because I just like didn't like I don't know if I knew how even. But I wasn't like I get it. Like I got it then and I get it now. Like I'm like so I just feel like that's different, but I want it because it's similar to how I feel about ghosting. Like sometimes, what if I don't have the emotional space to hear how you feel? Is that wrong? I'm not sure. Sure.
And that's the thing because it's like part of me is like, okay, the friend, Anna's friend, is setting a boundary. Like she's very clearly saying like, this is it. Like I'm no longer engaging in this.
Yeah.
She's ending it and she's not open. And I think the part that most people had the problem with was one, how it felt so much like HR language.
Yeah.
And two, how it felt like this permanent boundary that like there's no conversation going on around this. So like the other person doesn't really know what they did wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can get the therapy language thing, like the therapy speak and the HR language, because like it does, if you've been friends for 5 years and you've had a really good friendship, to get a message like that feels like it's almost someone like you don't know. It reminds me of like when people join a cult and then they set boundaries with their family. And it's like, you know, like, is this even the same person anymore?
Yeah,
and like I've even had like my parents like had friends go to therapy and do something along these lines in their life and with other people, and like they like think it's crazy and can't grasp it, and they've never been to therapy. And I think the older generation is even more like, what the fuck is going on?
Right, exactly.
But like I don't know, because it's hard to like say that, you know?
But I think there is a way to like utilize what actual therapy speak has to offer and still humanize it. Yes, it's hard. But exactly, like, even if you had only been friend for 1 year, like, you owe something more than, like, an automated message. But
like AI.
I do empathize with how hard it is. And I've wanted to just, because my therapist, like, that's what they say sometimes. Like, they really say, like, how, like, we don't talk like that. So it sounds wild.
Yeah.
So I get that it's hard, but 5 years is crazy. And it's like, just to do that like over text, you know what I mean? And don't be like, I did it over text. Because like our situation is beyond different, babe. I swear on my grandmother's grave, like I don't feel any type of way. But that, like, that's crazy. Because what was even like really going down? I guess
and that's
we don't
the thing.
know.
She doesn't know. And like, I feel like the best way I would
like, I knew it was obvious. Like, it wasn't, like, any mystery, you know?
Yeah, and in our situation, it was, like, definitely more obvious. But I feel like in this, if you're, like, if you want to cut off a friend and you don't think they're really going to, like, understand why you're cutting them off, and, like, you don't always owe them an explanation. But I do think, like, if they're not abusive and toxic in the way that it actually means, like that doesn't mean that they're not hurting you and you've had bad experiences or that you need to grow without them in your life anymore. I think like a message like that would look something more like, hey, like I've really like appreciated your friendship, like I love you, like I wish you the best, like something that's more like acknowledging that they're gonna
like
feel
I know
a way
this
about
really
this.
sucks. Like I never
And like
yeah.
But I think it's fine to say like I'm not in the space to like talk about it, and this is what I need to do for myself. I think that that's okay.
Paired with other shit.
paired with like who you still are.
Like you can utilize it. You can use those words, but yeah, I think it just comes across like so, and especially with how many people overuse it and how everyone knows all these words, it just feels like it feels very disingenuous. That's the word.
Yeah, it feels very cold.
Yeah, and from your 5-year bitch, like that's
right.
I would literally be fucking so mad.
If you have no idea what you did, which we're gonna get into with the next one. So this is a couple, Caitlin 30 and her wife Camille 32 from Chicago, found themselves in a difficult situation when a couple they were close to began pulling away without explanation. When Caitlin confronted them about why they were ghosting, they essentially proceeded to do an intervention, accusing her of mistreating and abusing Camille and claiming her relationship dynamic made them uncomfortable. The husband of the couple told me that it was clear I was incapable of being self-reflective and all this stuff, basically using therapy speak to say you're a shitty person and you don't care about other people and you're a narcissist, Caitlin says.
Camille assured her there was nothing wrong, but the conversation still devastated Caitlin. She reached out to everyone she knew to see if they could corroborate the toxic picture the couple had painted. I called my mom, I called my sister, I called my best friend, everybody, to be like, is there something that I'm not seeing here that they're seeing that I need to change? She says, I had a complete breakdown. That just gave me chills. That's so sad.
I know.
Months later, the couple reached out, admitted they were projecting their own relationship troubles onto Caitlin and Camille, and eventually split up. I'm screaming! But the ordeal had taken its toll. Quote, it became something that I thought about any time we had the slightest argument, the slightest disagreement, Camille says. I was always on alert, like, oh no, is there something in my relationship that I'm not seeing? Darby Saxby, a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of Southern California, says that some of the therapy speak can add more weight to what's ultimately a one-sided observation. Quote, it feels more official, more legitimized, more of a final sounding judgment when you give somebody a diagnostic label or you label a friendship in a particular way, she says. But people in relationships are fluid, she says, and having fixed ways to describe your particular relationship or individuals cheats us of some of that flexibility. Some of the my way or the highway, I'm setting a boundary that you can't cross or else advice out there, she notes, can ultimately backfire. Quote, there's an extent to which defining a lot of boundaries and being very quick to abandon relationships that aren't optimal actually sets people up to be a lot more isolated and lonely, she says. Saxby notes that it's essential to be mindful of other people's interiority and the fact that everybody deserves to be in a healthy relationships. After all, Saxby says, really good relationships are a two-way street. Wow.
Yeah, this one, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit like self-reflecting because and we didn't explain this when we're talking about like our friendship or whatever.
Oh, no.
Like when I did end our friendship, like I cut Autumn off.
And
like,
guys, this was a while ago. Like what year did that happen? This was a long
time ago, like 2020.
2020.
So
like
4 years
ago. Like we are so past it.
We're
it's
so
like,
past it.
It's never going to be funny, but like I can laugh.
Yeah, but it was a long time ago. But like at that time, it was similar where I was in a relationship where like it was the abusive relationship and things were bad. And so I'm like, I do think I was projecting some of the things in my relationship onto you, or at least like at the time not acknowledging that like you being in my life was, you know, like I knew the effect that it was having on our friendship. It just wasn't like working anymore because like I was like using a lot of like your time and I was just being like negative and depressed and like whatever all the time, but like all of those things. So I feel like when I think about it like now from your perspective, and like I know you say like you know how it happened and you were feeling some of the same things at the time,
right?
It was nothing that you had done though.
Yeah.
It was like, and that's why it was like, to me, I think a little bit like unfair. You know what I'm saying? Because similar to this couple where it's like the other couple ended the relationship with this couple, blaming things on them. And I think I did say mean things to you at the time, but it was nothing about that couple.
Yeah.
It was about them and their own stuff.
Right.
So, you know, like, that's why I'm like, I've definitely kind of been in this situation before. And the hard thing, too, because I don't think I can say I can empathize because I haven't been in the situation of the other couple that's been, like, cut off. But part of me is also, like, I feel like in that situation, you have to let it go. Like, continuously asking all of your friends about it and, like, searching and continuously reaching out to them after they ghost you is almost, like, counterproductive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
it's like they're setting this boundary and you're kind of, like, not respecting it in a way, too.
Yeah.
Even if the boundary arguably isn't right or wrong. Like, if these people need to deal with their shit and can't be in this friendship anymore, I don't think it's helpful to try to, like, bring them back into the friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying what you said. And, like, I hear you. And, like, I knew that and I completely understand. And I made that face because it's so hard for me to hear you say, like, I was using your time. Like, bitch, I wanted to be with you. Like, but also on the other hand, it was not good for you. Like, you needed to figure it out. And so that's why I'm like, I'll just let her have it. But that's why I made that face, guys. I wasn't, like, judging. It's just because it's hard to, like, hear you say that.
Yeah.
But I completely understand it. And I think, like, you know, it's sad for the other couple as well. And I think you see that a lot. It's like, you know, we know that we have issues, but it's like, let me put this on other people. Not everyone else is perfect as well. And that'll make us feel better. And although it's fucked up, it's like you do see how the mind works like that. Like, it makes sense. And I just thought of this, but I have cut off a friend before. Like, when I was in, it was summer going into sophomore year of college. I was really close with one of my friends that we went to school together growing up. We've been friends since middle school. We were both engaging, like, highly in eating disorder activities together. Like, she would pick me up every day at 8 a.m. We'd go to the gym. We'd eat raw carrot sticks for lunch. Like, we were so codependent and, like, she was, you know, I was the one that, like, had struggled. And then, like, it, like, happened, like, really bad for her, like, when we started hanging out. So, like, we were not good for each other. And, like, we were really codependent. And basically what happened is, like, I decided to, like, go get help. And, like, that's when I, like, did that inpatient program in college, like, part-time. And I was like, I'm so sorry, but, like, I need to cut you off. And, like, I always felt so bad about that. And she was so hurt by that because I was like, I can't look at you without, like, I can't look at you without thinking about all the stuff that we did together. And it's not your fault because I was encouraging it. And, like, and we're friends now. Like, we moved on from it. But it was a whole thing. Like, it felt like a breakup. And, like, I feel like she was mad about it. Like, she was like, well, how can you put that on me? Because she wasn't really at the point where she realized she had a problem. So she was like, but you're going through that. Like, I'm good. And it was really hard. But I did hear her out. Like, I think I probably sent her some sort of text. But I remember I was in the therapy, or I was in, like, the hospital type space when I was texting her. Because I was talking to one of the psychologists. I was like, I don't know what to do about this. I feel like I have to cut her off. And they encouraged me to. They're like, cut everything out. And it was kind of OD. And, like, aside from that, like, we had a really beautiful friendship. Like, we were really, you know, good friends. And it's like, it is sad. And that part in the article about, it's like the loneliness and it's like cutting everyone off. And I've had a problem with that. It's like, I associate people with bad times. And that's why I'm like, honestly, thank God we did have that break. Because what if I was like, oh no, like, I just see you with stripping and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that I went off and did it on my own, like, helped too. So thank God, babe. Because I've done that with so many people. And it's like, is it right? Is it wrong? Like, it is sad you're ending relationships. Like, I don't really have that many friends. Like,
but sometimes it is necessary, and especially when you're in recovery for something like an eating disorder, addiction, like you're in an abusive relationship like I was, or like you need to, like, not isolate yourself completely, because you should have other people around you that are, like, supportive of this new leaf that you're turning over. But, like, those are, I would argue, like, triggers and stuff like that. And And also, if you're really committed to this journey of trying to get healthy and all of those things, you need to change your environment, change your relationships, all of that stuff. And that doesn't mean that you're like shutting the door on these people and these places and this stuff like forever.
Right.
But I think you do need to like, in that situation, it makes so much sense that you need to like block it out, get yourself right, form boundaries, like healthy boundaries that you're like, okay, if she says this, or if we go to this place and like we used to do this routine, I've been through the recovery. I know that I can say no to this. I know, like, you know, like form that first and then come back healthier into the relationship.
And speaking of gaslighting, during that time, I gaslit Emerson College that like, I don't want to pay for the meal plan because I'm not, and they're like, you have to, like, it was like a whole thing. It was crazy, but it's just like, it is still valid that she was hurt by that too. As much as I needed to cut that off for myself, it's still valid to be hurt. Like, it sucks, you know? So it's all okay.
Yeah. So the next one that we're going to talk about is family. And this is from the same article. A little bit shorter. Carrie, who asked to withhold her age for privacy reasons, says her brother spent months ghosting their parents without explanation. Carrie's parents were devastated, and when she tried to mediate or at least get some of the answers, he resisted, telling her that if she defended their parents, he wouldn't feel safe. He created this whole thing about his safety, his boundaries, his rules, she says. Obviously, that's important, but it's like he came into it with the framework like he's the only real person in the world and everybody else has to do exactly what he says to make him feel safe. And this one, guys, like, I'm not going to lie because
Babe,
I have...
You sure you want to talk about this right now?
Yeah, I feel like it's fine. But yeah, I live far away from my family. I have for a while. I've gone through lots of periods of ghosting my family. And one thing about my family, like, I feel like boundaries is a thing, like me being able to set them and hold them and also them like respecting them and not like being on top of me. Yeah. And so I've had these conversations like with my brother and my family members, and I think that I have been seen as the selfish person who doesn't care about my family members and doesn't communicate and is like just ghosting and being far away. And I feel a lot of guilt about it to the point where it makes it worse because I'm like, oh, I've been ghosting for so long. Now I can't talk to them because they already think that, whatever. And I think it's a two-way street, unfortunately, because I think I didn't go through trauma with my family at all, but we had some bad experiences that I think required me to go heal away from them and come back to be able to properly set boundaries and have a healthier relationship. I think there's also healing on their side that I would love for them to do, but it's just not there yet. And so I think it is my responsibility to communicate more, and I have not always been good about that. Like, I will just ghost and not being like, oh, I'm setting this not because I think I'm afraid that it would be received well, to be like, oh, I'm setting this boundary because I need to take care of myself. On the other side of that, the hardest thing for me in this position is that, and maybe because I haven't communicated that, is that they never understand it and they're always like upset with me for not being there, and that makes it worse, right? Because I think we do need to respect when someone like separates themselves from a situation. And it's so tricky because it is hurtful. Like, these things are painful, like cutting any sort of ties, even if they're temporary, even if they seem permanent, but they are temporary. Any sort of cutting ties is extremely painful. And I can't even imagine from like a parent perspective with a child, like that is your fucking kid. But at the same time, like, I think they are necessary sometimes. I don't know. Like, this is a complicated one.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm a similar situation. Like, I moved away from home same time, like in 2020, and like I've been on literally the opposite side of the fucking like forever. And like, I have a great relationship with my moms. Like, I'm really lucky. Like, they're both social workers. Like, I feel very comfortable like saying things to them. But, like, I'm your typical daddy issues bitch. Like, I'll tell you guys right now, I do not know how to set boundaries with my dad. And to be honest, I don't know if I ever will, because it's just, like, we just have, like, I don't know, But we have a deep ass relationship that like we used to be really close, and then like I kind of like went through puberty and like that was over.
Yep.
And we only see each other like once a year, and we like never really talk. Like maybe a text here and there, but like he doesn't know anything about me. Like straight up.
Yeah.
He doesn't. Like I don't know what he thinks I do. Like he
His
doesn't.
perception is.
He knows
yeah.
like the job I have, the area I live, but like he doesn't. So it's just kind of like not even there. And it's like my mom always does tell me like it's on you to like start those conversations because like unfortunately he's not. But she's like, I know he wants to, but he doesn't know how. And it's like, okay, but like I'm tired, like whatever. So family is so complicated. But the part in the article about like how people are like, everyone needs to do everything to make me feel safe. Like, bro.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really hard. Like when you have been through some serious shit, like it's valid to kind of feel that way because you do feel like, okay, like I've been through this and you guys haven't, or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, it's like, unfortunately, like you, again, like boundaries are about you, not about other people. And of course, we can wish and we can want other people to make sure we feel safe. But at the end of the day, we can't expect that 24/7. We just can't, like, because you're going to be devastated. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So it's really hard. But yeah, family is really complicated. I don't even know. Like, I wish I had more to say, but it's like, my mom's good. And when I say moms, it's like I have two moms and then I have a dad and a stepmom. And like, I like, there's never been anything. Like, I just don't. There's like a block. So it's hard.
Yeah, setting boundaries with your family is so hard because I feel like if anyone's not going to respect boundaries, it's going to be your fucking family. But, so next we're going to get into romantic relationships. Yay. And this article is from Vox called Social Media Can't Be Your Couple's Therapist. From red flags to emotional load, popular terms on platforms like TikTok can warp our IRL relationships. Do you want to read this?
Yeah. So I understand the frustration that both parties have right now, Nasir says. This influx of this kind of content, I think, is really creating a gap between the worlds of men and women, even though they're meant to bridge it. These social media clips have given people a standard to measure their relationships against. Recognizing others are experiencing the same frustrations with their partners can be validating. But pronouncing certain personality quirks as red flags can be counterproductive. We've done that, low-key.
Yep.
According to experts. While the inundation of relationship content has undoubtedly empowered people to leave abusive or dysfunctional relationships, the bar is now set extremely high. How many videos suggest common aspects of relationships like ghosting, maybe toxic or even abusive? However, bringing the language of TikTok to your relationship can breed constructive conversations if done correctly. Algorithms shape what content users see, often elevating posts similar to those they've engaged with in the past. If you felt validated by a post about narcissistic partners, your feed may become populated with clips further influencing that perspective. What you find is something telling you things that you agree with all day long, says Sanam Hafiz, the director and neuropsychologist at Comprehensive Consultation Psychological Services. A deluge of content suggesting your partner is taking advantage of you or is mistreating you might convince you this is your reality, something you might have never considered without the nudge of social media creators, Hafiz says. This social media courage, Hafiz continues, could lead people to act impulsively in ways they may come to regret. Cheating, insulting a significant other during an argument, passive-aggressively sending a clip to their partner, or even breaking up. Validation can quickly morph into confirmation bias, Nasir says, where every post supports your belief that your partner does not respect you, is exhibiting red flags, or is gaslighting you. If you watch enough videos where men are painted as toxic or manipulators, or women are said to seek constant validation from social media, you may not feel as compassionate toward your own partner when they make mistakes. How can you have empathy for your partner even though you're being inundated with this content that is telling you that your partner is wrong and you are right, Nasir says. That's the worst thing that people want to hear in my sessions.
Yeah, so I don't want to talk about this too much because we do have a whole dating paranoia content episode that I think like gets into this a little bit more, like with the guru girlies, like theory TikTok, all of that stuff. But I do
check that out, guys. We're almost at 2K. Let's go.
Yes, please. Let's bring it up. So check out that one for more on this. I think the article summarizes it pretty well, but I do want to watch this one TikTok a little bit about couples therapy, and then I have a meme that we can discuss together.
Hey, did you do the dishes? You were supposed to. Hey, sorry for interrupting. Is there a chance you didn't do the dishes? Excuse me, but do I have permission to initiate a constructive dialogue? Humility is one of my love languages, and since you are therefore filling my intimacy bucket, I will thus allow it. If you'll permit this observation, I happened to notice the dishes were undone when it was your responsibility to do so, which triggers feelings of invalidation and destructive withdrawal. I'm sorry, but I'm currently unable to let down the emotional barrier necessary for this kind of reflective listening. That's okay. Would you like to pencil in one-on-one time at a later date to discuss this possible friction and avoid further escalation? If I have the proper amount of time to rest, unplug, and sustain my emotional fitness, then I will think about considering. Thank you. I appreciate you. The feeling is mutual without crossing a boundary. Great. Excellent work. That'll be $200.
So this meme was the initial idea. I knew I wanted to do an episode something about this. This was the initial idea, and then I saw this TikTok, and I was like bringing it all together. So this was like the inspiration for this episode, because I think the first TikTok, when we talk about like couples therapy, like there comes a point where you can imply like use all of this language, but maybe the relationship, like you two just don't fucking get along and you need to fucking end it, and like that's that. And then with the meme where it's talking about an unhealthy relationship is quote unquote like, oh, let's just like, I love you, let's forget about this massive argument we had. Unhealthy is to just forget about it and move on. But healthy is to like scream at each other kind of in the way of this TikTok. And to me, I've gone back and forth about this, right? Because it's like, there's a right, quote unquote, way to do relationships, and there's a wrong way. And like when we employ all this therapy speak and we're considerate of other people and da-da-da-da, like there comes a point where sometimes you need to just be like, it's fine, I love you, move on, we can think differently.
Right.
Or there comes a point where it's like you're in therapy and you go into whatever. So,
Bro, you every time we do these episodes, like I think I know things, and now I'm just like fucked up because I'm just like, I'm so tired of it. But that TikTok is phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that.
So
TikTok.
funny because it's like, that really is what it's giving. Like, I know it's exaggerative, but that is what's going on. But I think you're right. Like, I think it's like with everything, it's a healthy balance between the two. Like, sometimes you do just need to say, I love you and move on. Not when there was a real catastrophe or anything, but you know what I mean? Because all of that shit and like the tone policing, the attachment style, microaggression, like, I don't know. And the way it's like, okay, do you want to pencil in a time so we can, like, it's too much. Like, we don't need to become the therapist. Like, we take what therapists say, and it's like every single therapist you have, like right now you have a therapist that you love. I had a therapist I loved for like 4 years, but it's like, not all therapists are like correct. Like we're still human beings at the end of the day.
And they're not there in the situation.
They're not there. They're maybe not in this generation. Things are ever evolving. There's so much more to consider now with relationships where obviously you can grasp, but like it's nuanced. And I think it's just like, we're missing the mark. Like you don't want to be the therapist. Like you want to take what they give you, but like still communicate to your partner like you're like human beings that fuck with each other, you know?
Right. Because like not use HR language.
And again, it's like you can work it in. Like it's not like never say boundary. Like I think that's good, you know? Even if you have boundaries for yourself that don't even have to do with the relationship, like you should talk about that with your partner like 1000%. But it's getting to be way too much. And this is why boy sober, you know, this is another thing too. It's like there's just so fucking much, and it's almost like people got the tools and the words and like they like got some like power ego shit from that,
Yeah.
And like think that like the definitions are again loose and like you have the power to kind of morph it into your own, like, because this is my trauma though, or whatever.
Yeah, and that's perfect because I was going to bring this
Thank
in at
you.
the end, but I think I'm going to put it now. So I watched this one YouTube video called Let's Talk About Weaponization of Therapy Speak by Psychology with Dr. Anna, and she is a licensed therapist, and in her channel she says, you know, this is for informational and entertainment purposes. I'm not your therapist, blah, 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 blah. Like,
Nice.
take with it what you will. And she says she was defensive quite a bit about like this kind of speak, and then like the more she got into it, she kind of breaks down things which we're going to echo and like the problems and the cases for it when we get into it. But one of the quotes I loved the most from her is she was like, therapy speak, like anything, is a tool similar to a fork, and you can use a fork to eat or you can use it to stab someone.
Right.
So like, you know, therapy speak can be used as a tool to like find the language that you need when you're having these relationship discussions, or you can use it to be like, "Rah," like, you know?
Yeah, it's like depending on how you use said tool. It's not like both are correct, you know?
Yes.
It's just because you're saying the quote unquote educated words doesn't mean you're like killing it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay.
Okay, guys. So now we're going to get into a little bit about why people are using therapy speak. And this article from The New Yorker is called The Rise of Therapy Speak, How a Language Got Off the Couch and Into the World by Katie Waldman. And we're going to go back to this article in a little bit, but just one sentence from it. She said, perhaps the language of mental health is burgeoning because actual mental health is declining. And then I want to share some mental health statistics real quick. I'm going to put them on the screen. So 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness every year. 1 in 20 U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year. I'm not going to read through all of them, but it is important to note that 50% of the lesbian, gay, or bisexual community experiences mental health issues, which is really high compared to all other demographic groups. And then also 47.2% of U.S. adults with mental illnesses received treatment in 2021, so that's less than half. And the average delay between the onset of a mental illness and treatment is 11 years. So that's like a pretty fucking big gap. And
Wow.
then 10.6% of U.S. adults with mental illness had no insurance coverage in 2021, and 160 million people live in a designated mental health professional shortage area. So there is a therapy shortage. And then this article that we've been talking about before from The Guardian says that if we're often online and plugged into wellness, self-help, or relationship worlds on social media, therapy speak is our first language. Here, algorithms feed us a bottomless well of content by coaches and other self-proclaimed experts who teach us how to cope with being triggered, how to identify a narcissist, how to show up in relationships, how to hold a boundary, and so much more. With every scroll, a new tutorial in human psychology. But what are we actually learning? And I think it's important to note that a lot of people who don't have access to therapy and all of these things are seeking it out on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all of this
Just
stuff.
like how we talked about, like people, like they get a lot of their relationship advice from these platforms as well.
Exactly. So when people don't have access, this is what they go to. And this might also be the beginning kind of like route into it, because like I said, like it's 11 years since the onset. So some people might not completely have the language for it, realize that they have mental health. So it is a good thing that they're scrolling on TikTok. They may see something that resonates with them, and then that might trigger them, like not trigger in the sense of like a trigger, but like initiate them to start looking into mental health help and all of those things.
Yeah.
But this other article from Vox is called Tele-Therapy Can Really Help and Really Hurt. From privacy breaches to bad providers, teletherapy services often come with a hidden cost, by A.W. Olthizer. About teletherapy, because this has become something in the past couple years that has really like become more popular. And yeah, we're going to get into it. So the U.S. has a therapist shortage. Even if you find one, good luck snagging an appointment with a therapist who is affordable or covered by your insurance. That's where online therapy platforms like BetterHelp come in. Even if you're not a user, you've most certainly heard of them. For years, BetterHelp blanketed the online world with advertisements and enlisted an army of podcasters, influencers, and creators to produce sponsored content that promotes their services as a solution. According to podcast analytics From Magdalene AI, BetterHelp spent an estimated $24.6 million on podcast ads in the first quarter of 2024. And you got to think, that's in the first quarter of 2024. Before that, I've been hearing BetterHelp forever.
It's so irritating.
Yeah, and they have a lot of backlash, which we're going to get into. So more than any other company spent in the audio space. So they are the number one spender in podcasts. Ad space. These ads, sometimes personal and direct to camera, sometimes funny and always earnest, have turned BetterHelp into probably the most recognizable sponsor of stuff people listen to on the internet. And then they did also disclose that BetterHelp does also advertise on Vox. BetterHelp has never advertised with us, guys. Unfortunately, we're not as big of a creator. I don't know if we would work with them anyway. Probably not. Exactly. Exactly. So, but the efficiency behind BetterHelp's infinite expansion, it seems, can come to a cost to patients, as about 800,000 former or current clients are learning this week. This is a little bit ago, but in 2023, the FTC said that BetterHelp shared sensitive data it collected on its users with advertisements seemingly without their consent, or with provisions in place to limit how data was then used. According to AP, BetterHelp has said it was simply adhering to practices that were standard for the industry. And since this is kind of like a new industry, what industry do they become a part of? So they were hit with a lawsuit. That was bad, whatever. Then a little further, mental health care goes remote. The start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 caused an abrupt shift in therapy access. Regulations and insurance policies restricting the feasibility of teletherapy were loosened. Some therapists and patients found that meeting online worked better for them. As Brian Resnick wrote for Vox at the time, the onset of the pandemic was a, quote, much needed kick forward into the 21st century for mental health care. For those seeking therapy, though, the new ease of finding virtual care meant sorting through waves of targeted ads on social media from companies that might not prioritize the quality of care over growing their business. Cerebral, founded in early 2020, enticed patients with easy subscription-based access to virtual psychiatric treatment, including prescriptions for medication treating ADHD, so like Adderall, Vyvanse, etc. But mental health professionals and patients raised worrying questions about the quality of that treatment. Underpaid providers were, according to Bloomberg, pressured to meet the expectations of patients who signed up for the service after seeing ads on social media promising a quick and seamless access to the medications. Then there was also a lawsuit with Cerebral, important to note.
I've heard of them for sure.
Yeah.
These companies that's like, they make it, they're known.
Yeah, they are definitely...
Whatever you podcast you listen to.
Yeah, and if you think about getting a therapist, usually one of the first ones you're going to enter into is one of these.
Like literally the Pixar deep diver channels I watch and lesbian podcasts I listen to, both like it's everyone. So
it's across genres.
I know.
Like it's every single type of shit. Mistakes happen, but when services in as vital as something as mental health go wrong, people get hurt. I think a lot about a 2022 story in the Wall Street Journal, which detailed what this can look like. Caleb Hill, a young adult who had been kicked out of his family home after coming out as gay, signed up for BetterHelp, requesting a therapist who specializes in LGBTQ plus issues. He was instead matched with a therapist whose private practice offers Christian counseling.
No!
And who told Hill that, quote, either you sacrifice your family or you sacrifice being gay, end quote. Hill told the paper. A former BetterHelp employee told the Journal that part of the issue was how the company's focus on growth leads to minimal training and oversight process for therapists. I felt like they were treated like Uber drivers. Sonia Bruner, BetterHelp's clinical director and later a consultant to the company, told the Journal. There are a lot of good counselors on there, but you also find counselors who aren't, who do the minimum, who don't get paid a lot, so they phone it in. And this is something, like my therapist right now, she told me she used to work for BetterHelp, and she said it was like awful in terms of like the payment process, like they were on time with payments, like the therapy sessions are really short. I want to say they're a half hour as opposed to an hour. I had also signed up for BetterHelp when I was in my abusive relationship and looking for like cheaper therapy and had a really bad experience. Like she pretty much told me that my issues were too big for her, which honestly, in some senses, I'm like, was good because it probably
whoa. She said that to you, bro?
Yeah, she said that my issues were too much for what she could provide. And it would have been okay if she like linked some resources. Yeah, exactly. Like it would have been nice if she was like, okay, like go to this person instead, like whatever. But she was kind of like, yeah, we can't really solve it in 30 minutes. Like, bye. So yeah, I just feel like with the thing about BetterHelp and Cerebral and teletherapy in general, because I do teletherapy still, but not through any of these platforms, is it's made access much better. There's a therapy shortage still, so like now there's more like therapists that people can, get access to. I think the requirements to be a therapist on BetterHelp are also lower than what they are for general other stuff.
Right.
But either way, like more people are doing therapy or getting access to it, but the quality is not as good and it leads to a lot of bad experiences. So
yeah. It's so hard. Every therapist I've ever found, I found on Psychology Today, I'm pretty sure. But I also, since before this year, I've been very privileged with really good health insurance. Like otherwise, I don't think Psychology Today is that, you're not going to have that many options. And it's all just so sad when you think about it. Like you think about the mental health crisis, then it's like there's a shortage of therapists, and then BetterHelp comes out and people are like running to it damn near, only to be met with something horrible,
Yeah.
And it's like therapists can say weird things no matter what, but it's like the consistency of horror stories from these platforms, it's like it's blatant. Like it's not good. And yes, like yeah, maybe you could find a good one, but I don't want to take my chances. Like I've had a therapist tell me that I'm not skinny enough to really have an eating disorder before. And I was
that's crazy.
I was like 14 years old, and like I kid you not, something sparked in me that day. I was like, you know what, bitch? Like she skyrocketed my shit. And it's just like she wasn't educated in eating disorder. Yeah. She wasn't. Like I was in there for depression. All of a sudden I start having these other feelings. Like she had no idea, but it's like hearing that from therapists like really
it has a weight
with people.
Yeah.
And so it's like almost dangerous, like depending on the state that you're in, to like test that out. And it's just horrible. It's like the beauty industry. I get it. You guys are exploited, but it's like with mental health too. It's just like, it's so rotten. And yeah, it's like a substitute teacher type vibe, like an Uber driver, the comparison. It's like who's ever kind of, and I'm sure for someone with not a lot of experience and really wants to be a therapist, it's a great option for them. Yeah. But I just feel like the majority of people on there, it's just not good. And it makes me just so sad because it's like we know that there's a huge mental health crisis on all ends of everybody, everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's last thing I'll say is just like with the COVID thing and everything went online, it's like I really do think that I was benefiting more with going in person, but I think because I'm a person that like struggles to like commit to appointments or like show up in person, like that's something that's hard for me, and my depression like isolates me, so it helped me a lot. But also it's like with the job I've had, or with the jobs I've had for the past couple of years, I would have had no time to go into an office.
Yes.
So it saved me that I could go on my quote unquote lunch
and
break.
Ubers, because you got to think like if you're going to Uber there.
So it's hard. But I think if you can go in person, it does provide something new. And sometimes it's like my therapist can't see my body language. She can't see that my hand's twitching, like, or whatever. Like, you know, so... But I think it's like the pandemic and it's all just like piling down, and it's like we need more therapists. They have this solution and it did so much more harm than good, and it's horrible.
Yeah, and you got to think even there's people like what was it, Caleb, who had like a very clearly obviously bad experience with BetterHelp, but then there's other people who this is their first experience with therapy. And it might be a bad therapist that is giving them bad advice and bad therapy speak, whatever, not to say all therapists, whatever, but like because the requirements are more minimum, someone could think they're getting good therapy, but it's not, and it's causing all these therapy speak issues and whatever that we see like manifesting in greater society.
Yeah. Oh, it's so scary. It's so scary.
It's terrifying. A lot of people are boycotting. A lot of influencers are kind of like boycotting their BetterHelp as like, you know, someone that they
I have
choose to
heard,
work
but
with.
some of them, like Shannon Beveridge, like did one the other day. I was like, girl, like you have money. Like, I mean, she doesn't. I know. Stop assuming influencers
I know.
are
I
rich.
mean, it's a nuanced conversation because it's like, is it better than nothing for some people? Has it worked for some people? Yes.
Right.
Has it not? Like,
Yeah,
it's,
I'm sorry, Shannon.
It's a little tricky. But yeah, you want to read the polls?
Yeah, let's do it. So, and I just want to say, like, Shannon, if you're listening, like, I'm sorry. Like, I hate when people do that, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like when people promoted Sheen and everyone gets mad. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like, we're just in this same system. It's like, you need to make money. So, like, I just caught myself, like, my bad. Okay, so we asked y'all, where do you get most of your mental health and relationship insights? And 39% said friends and family, 28% said my therapist, 20% said mental health influencers on TikTok and Instagram, and 13% said podcasts or YouTube videos. What the fuck is the next line, bitch?
That's a listener story. They said they get their mental health advice from red meat, cooked medium rare, and whiskey on the rocks. You can
Okay, I
imagine
get
this is a
it
man.
now. I get it.
Yeah,
that's
but
how they cope with shit. Yeah,
Right. I will say, like,
Like-
to me, this was interesting that a lot of people are getting it from friends and family, because when we talk about how so many people are using therapy speak incorrectly, though I think it's important and it is really helpful to talk to friends and family about mental health issues, they are not like licensed professionals, and sometimes
Right.
they do give you bad advice.
Yeah.
So like, you know,
Yeah, I did vote for friends and family only because I'm not in therapy right now, but like I've been in it on and off for a really long time. Like I'm just taking a break, but I definitely need to go back, you guys, like for sure. But also, I don't really have health insurance anymore. I have one, but it's like super little, and like it's kind of just, it's too expensive. So, but I feel like I do talk to, like, I go to my friends and family when I'm like having issues for things. So I feel like that's where it like comes up. But at the end of the day, it's like, I know that it's like licensed therapist is like the way to go. But also it's like, my mom's a social worker, so it's a little bit different. But I'm not, like, every advice she's given me, I mean, she's never steered me wrong. Anyways. But
I do want to say one other thing about this, though. Because it is, like, kind of split. I mean, we have, like, 20% with TikTok and Insta, and then we also have 13% podcast and YouTube videos. And this is kind of, like, what we were talking about with these algorithms and people taking things, like, out of context. Like, most of these mental health influencers are licensed therapists or in school or whatever. And a lot of them do give disclaimers that, like, I'm not your therapist. Everything is like general advice, but I don't know you. I don't know your situation, whatever. But I do think that that leads to a lot of like this therapy speak being used, because I'll tell you, like, when I'm in a difficult situation, particularly like relationships or whatever, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I'm gonna go on TikTok and be like, oh, attachment styles, like they're like, and it's bad sometimes. Like you shouldn't really do that too much unless you're actually like looking at multiple sources and you're comparing
like
and you're
good
thinking deeply.
creators, because that's okay. Because it's also like, you know, you're seeking community. It's like, am I the only one that's spiraling about this shit? It's more than that. I don't think you're necessarily going them for the end all be all, because you're great with like insight, like just like it's a tool, like it's information to have, but then you move like accordingly, like how you should, you know?
Yeah, but like
even with therapists, like you can't always like live by them, like that's it, you know?
Yeah.
I've definitely like taken some things from therapy. It was like, you know, I understand maybe why they said that, but like I'm like, I don't really, that doesn't resonate with me, so I'm gonna move on. Like that happens. Like they're not perfect, you know?
Yeah, and especially in these like 1 minute, 2 minute TikTok videos, like they're defining an attachment style or whatever, but like they have no context of like what you're going through. They don't have 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get into the depths of all the different ways this can manifest and how it might apply to you. And you might, like a tarot card reading, see something that resonates with you and be like, oh, this is it. And I think that's why we have so many people being like, oh, my ex is a narcissist. Oh, we trauma bonded. Oh, whatever. When it's like, you saw this one thing that kind of stuck with you, but maybe that's not really what it is because you're not looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's like at the end of the day, we all have unique situations. Like, we want to find community, but it's like blending everything together. Like, oh, this is just that. And, you know, it's like, it's not good. It's not good. But I do think people just want to feel like they're not alone to a certain extent. And then the next poll we asked y'all is, if you aren't in therapy but want to be, why aren't you in therapy? And 64% said it's too expensive. 18% said I haven't found a therapist I liked. 9% said I don't have time. And 9% said I'm not ready yet. Definitely it's too expensive for me. It's like absolutely fucking ridiculous. But also not finding a therapist you like is so real too. Like, I've definitely gone through, like, and I'm like, you kind of like, I just always say go with your gut. Like, at the end of the day, they're human beings. Like, don't think about it like, do I want to be friends with them? But it's like, do I trust this person? Do I feel this like energy safety? Like, do I feel safe initially? Like, and you have to work up to it, of course, as well. Sometimes it's like, don't rule them out after one session. Like, it does kind of take, first sessions are so annoying. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, so who's your parents? Like, I don't know.
And you're just dumping. It's like,
you don't really get anything done until like it takes.
And then you have a therapy hangover.
It's a
and
commitment.
Then it's like,
But I think, you know, it's too expensive. That makes so much sense. And someone submitted a story saying, my old therapist told me, why are you sad? You're pretty. That's disturbing. I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Extremely disturbing.
I'm really, really sorry that happened to you. As if pretty people can't be sad.
That's sad? Crazy. Like, bitch, what? But yeah, the expensive thing, I think that is like the biggest reason a lot of people aren't, like, again, when we talk about access. I mean, I had to go down to one appointment a month versus
girl,
one a week
like, how are you?
Like, and that's only, and I'm a cash client now. I had signed up for health insurance, everything with my job, and I have a good job, you know, decent health insurance, but it was insane. The prices are ridiculous. So it's like, you know, it makes sense. But I wanted to discussion question. We kind of already talked about it, but like with all of this, like with this therapy shortage, limited access to therapy, bad therapists, we can kind of see why people are going online to get their therapy. But like, is all of this a problem? Like, where's the line?
Yeah, I think it's valid though. You know, it makes sense that people are going online, and there are a lot of smart, reliable, educated, consistent, valid creators out there that can actually provide you with a lot. But it's like, I feel like we just treat people like they're God all the time. It's like, especially it's like mental health and influencer, like, it's tricky because you have parasocial relationships. I've been victim to that many times where I put people on pedestals and I don't know them. And I look at them like they're incapable of literally doing anything wrong. And I'm not joking, you guys. Like, it doesn't happen to everyone, but like, it's happened to certain celebrities and influencers online with me. And like, then you pair it with like people giving mental health advice, you know, and even no matter how many times someone says I'm not your therapist, at the end of the day, you're giving advice online. Like, people are gonna, you know, take it if they really fuck with you, and like the addiction loop of content and all of that. And it's like, there's no education about media literacy. So we say that, but it's like, well, how do you know? Like, they don't have a website, and it seems like they're saying valid things. Like, so it's just confusing. But I think it's like, you really just have to take everything like maybe like 70% and like leave the 30% for you to like think critically. Because I fall victim to that a lot, where I'll read articles or watch certain TikToks and be like, yes, that is the answer. Perfect, clean motherfucking cut. But you need to like, I don't think about it for myself. Like, I don't even take 5 seconds to be like, okay, well, what would I really say? You know? So it's like, you have to leave room for yourself as well to like be in that conversation, because you know more than you think you do. And especially when we're talking about specific situations, like you're the only one really in it. No one else can really tell you 1000%, no matter how much you paint the picture. So it's like we need to have more trust in ourselves and like listen to our inner voice more. And I don't think it's bad that there's content about mental health. I mean, it's not. Like Gen Z has definitely made so much movement in a good way when it comes to mental health.
Yes.
1000%. But I think like with everything that we talk about that goes viral online in these parasocial influencer relationships, it's not going to be perfect. So I don't think it needs to go away. But again, it's like we need more education. Like we need, you know, more legitimate people doing this if this is going to be a thing. So that's how I feel, guys.
Yeah, 100%. Like everything you said. And then the only thing I'll add is like the confirmation bias, which you kind of said with the addiction loop of it. But like, I know for me, it's been really helpful having a therapist because sometimes I will say something and she'll be like, hold on, you know, you're thinking about this wrong. Like you are the person who's in the wrong in this situation. You are not setting the boundary. I know, right? Like she knows, but like she's telling me versus if you're engaging in a like TikTok or YouTube video or a podcast where there's no back and forth of that conversation, you can just like take this information in and be like, oh yes, this confirms what I thought and this is right. Versus like taking it to another person where there's like a dialogue and they're like, oh no, you're not right in this situation.
And our brains are crazy. Like it's like that's going to happen. Like when you're consuming all this content, like we can't control that, but it's on us to like redirect ourselves because our brain can't do that on its own. Like it's just gonna give, you know, what we're giving it is what it's gonna take as truth. Yeah. You need to like have that extra space to think about it for yourself without any godlike individuals guiding you.
All right, so now we're going to get into the problems with therapy speak. So the first one is access, and pulling from that same New Yorker article from before. In the United States, basic mental health care remains a luxury item. There's a reason why the most fluent speakers of the trending argot tend to be wealthy and white. This may explain some of the irritation that therapy speak occasionally provokes. The words suggest a sort of woke posturing, a theatrical difference to norms of kindness, and they also show how the language of suffering often finds its way into the mouths of those who suffer the least. Next, we have the misuse of this language from the same New Yorker article.
For Lori Gottlieb, the author of the book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, the downsides of casual therapy speak are more straightforward. Quote, I want to be clear that there's no reason why people who are not professional psychologists should be expected to use these terms correctly, she told me. But there's a lot of inaccuracy. Error can be introduced via colloquialism, OCD for organized, or the actual misconstrual of a word's meaning. Someone mistaking conflict for abuse or labeling you a gaslighter because you've expressed an opinion that they don't agree with. As philosophers from Michel Foucault to Peter Conrad have observed, medical vocabulary lifts up the speaker, claiming that your intrusive neighbor has borderline personality disorder, cloaks you in authority while pathologizing him. Using these words casually strips them of complexity. The problem with armchair therapy, or what we now might call Instagram therapy, is that it can transform a deeply relational, nuanced, contextual process, Gottlieb said, into something ego-directed, as if the point were always, I'm the most important person and I need to take care of myself. Wow.
Yeah. So going off of this a little bit more about the third issue with therapy speak is selfishness, individualism, power, and control. First, we have from the Guardian article, Kate teaches biology in a secondary school in Manchester, where she has worked for 15 years. She has been a former tutor for 10. In her experience, conversations she hears among teenagers and the way issues brought to her are described have changed dramatically in the last 5 years. Quote, I hear words like triggered, gaslighting, and narcissist so often, she says. Young people are using these words to describe their fellow pupils and other teachers when they feel hurt or singled out. I had to look up what gaslighting meant. She reflects empathetically on how difficulties in friendships when you're at school can feel like the end of the world. You want to validate how they feel, she says, because being a teenager is really hard, but sometimes it seems as if they're wedded to words they've picked up on social media. They're dismissing each other and sometimes struggling to take responsibility for their own behavior because they have compelling words like, quote, triggered, that make their own feelings the most important thing above everything else.
Yeah, it's so interesting how it does make you seem like authoritative when you diagnose someone like that. Yeah. And it's just like, it's so wrong that we go to think that way, but it is very true. If you don't think critically about it, you're like, oh, this person knows what's up. Like, no, they don't.
Right. And it's so interesting that, like, her being a teacher in a different generation, she's having to look up these words because, like, young people are using them.
Right.
So you can see how this is, like, manifesting in the next generation, like Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like, whatever. So still within this same category of, like, the individualism, power control, selfishness, we have Esther Perel, who I love. Esther Perel. She's,
I know who that is.
A couples therapist. She has a podcast, she does speaking engagements, all of these things. But this article from Vanity Fair is an interview with her. And it's called Esther Perel Thinks All This Amateur Therapy Speak Is Just Making Us Lonelier. And I'm going to be the interviewer and Autumn's going to be Esther Perel. So what do you make of this current moment of mainstream therapy speak? I'm thinking just as one example of how people on dating apps now brag about being in therapy.
The conversation about mental health, you know, that therapy is not for the crazies. It actually has a lot of good in it. I come from a generation where going to therapy was the thing you never mentioned. The fact that it's becoming a sign of being an evolved person is an interesting thing. It means I'm thinking about myself. I'm reflective. I have an interiority. I'm a deep and self-aware person. It has taken on this whole other aura. There is something about bringing more clarity and understanding to things that people have struggled with forever and often in isolation. But there's a paradox. There is such an emphasis on the self-care aspect of it that is actually making us more isolated and more alone, because the focus is just on the self. The focus is not about the mutuality of relationships, the reciprocity, the way that you weave fabric, you know, between people who are relying on each other. On one hand, there is an importance in gaining clarity when you name certain things. On the other hand, there is a danger that you lose all nuance, that you're basically trying to elevate your personal comments and personal experience by invoking the higher authority of psychobabble. What you call therapy speak, we used to call psychobabble. It's a new word for an old concept. In the past, you could have said, I think this, and so does the rest of the community. So does the family, so does the church. Today you say, I think this, and so does the DSM-5. I don't like what you do, so I say you're gaslighting me. You have a different opinion, and I bring in a term that makes it impossible for you to even enter into a conversation with me. Labeling enables me to not have to deal with you. But in the end, it creates more and more isolation and fragmentation. That is not necessarily a good thing for the community and for the social good.
The labeling has definitely infiltrated the way we relate to each other. People will read about attachment theory and then walk around with a specific identification as an avoidant or an anxious attachment type.
In the past, you would have said, I'm a member of this party, or I go to this church. Now you say, I'm a member of this attachment group. I think that putting people in boxes and reducing their complexity is problematic. If you start to name yourself by one little thing, you know, like I have insecure attachment, what are you saying about yourself? Why do you want to reduce yourself to one over-important label? Also, what this does is put clinical terminology into the hands of non-clinically trained people who then weaponize it. There's a reason we go to school for umpteen years and continue to be trained until we drop dead, because we still don't know it all. it's very important to show that therapy is a highly relational, nuanced, and contextual conversation. That is very different what you get on TikTok or Instagram or your friends in armchairs.
Yeah, I love Esther Perel because I think she always talks about like the nuances of things.
Right.
And how like, I mean, mutuality, which I have a hard time saying the fucking word, is something that I saw in another source too. Like the idea that it's like removing this like back and forth relationship or this like idea of context and nuance and like reciprocity and all of those things, I think is one of the like biggest issues with therapy speak. So I really like how she talks about, and also, you know, like, professionals versus not professionals, and that kind of
like putting these terms in the hands of non-clinically trained professionals to run with it and start trends. It's like, and she said at the beginning, the duality, like it's not a bad thing that people are talking about it, but just like what we've been saying, she echoed that like it is problematic and it's dangerous and there is so much nuance to every situation. And I feel like just as people, as a society, we do like to group things and clump things together. It maybe feels less overwhelming, which is okay. But it's like, when it comes to this type of terminology, it's like, you're not a trained professional, you know, sit down, you know, just sit down.
Right. And
sometimes.
Don't limit yourself to like, oh, I'm just insecure attached, so that's how I am.
Like the reality TV trauma definition, like that's all you are.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and all you'll ever be. Yeah. But you are more than that, and leave yourself room to grow. So the last part of
and I feel like just like sexuality, like attachment theory is low-key fluid, bro. Like, I feel like that shit, I know it has to do with like growing up and about your parents.
Yeah.
But like, I do think that like you can like bounce around, like maybe like something was a trauma response, but this is your real one or whatever.
And like your goal, right, is if you have anxious attachment, whatever, if that's what your therapist says, that's what you feel, like your goal is to not like continue to do behaviors that are the toxic side of anxious attached and put that on your partner and like work through that to be more secure. Like, you know, that's the goal.
I'm not gonna lie.
Just limit that to yourself.
I took the test the other day and I got secure.
Okay, so that's great.
I know.
That is
like,
great.
I was so happy. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay, period.
Okay, next we have the fourth and final one that I want to talk about with the problem with therapy speak is the defense mechanism.
Big one.
This is a big one. So it says, by virtue of being human beings, we're masters at distancing ourselves from difficult aspects of emotional life, says Dr. Jonathan Shelder, a psychologist at the University of California, San Francisco. One way we distance ourselves is through words. What we've got now is this kind of pop psychology language of cliches, abstract concepts, and turns of phrases that are so different from speaking from the heart. For Shelder, modern therapy speak is, quote, not actually a product of reflection and examination. In psychotherapy, he says, we always move from the general to the specific. People will say something general or abstract, and a good therapist is always asking for examples. If a person says that they feel stressed, we might say, okay, tell me more about that. How did you experience the stress? If a patient is using therapy speak, the goal of the work has to be to move away from this to something more immediate and emotionally alive. But some therapists, including myself and many I know, myself being the writer is also a therapist, believe that the expressive nature of therapy speak is actually not all that expressive. The language barely aligns with what therapy is, a singular relationship between the therapist and their client with its own intimate context and idiosyncrasies. Shelder focuses on the word, quote, triggered. For some people, it's very difficult to say I was angry or I was terrified. So there's already a layer of obfuscation about what their internal experience is. Something we try very hard not to do in therapy is locate the upsetting thing externally. If you leave the I was triggered there, your internal experience is almost secondary. In meaningful therapy, we try to reverse that. All of our experiences take on personal meanings. The work of therapy is to explore those layers. The psychotherapists I've trained with and have been supervised by use very little of the therapy speak I see on social media. Theory and literature inform the work, but conversations are in much more plain English than you might think. This is what we try to invite in our clients, the freedom to speak plainly. In my experience, some younger clients have brought in words like, quote, triggering, gaslighting, narcissism, and some confident diagnosis of others, quote, personality disorders. Sometimes it has seemed hard for them to name emotions like fear or anger. The influence over their language doesn't come from social media, but from reality shows like Love is Blind, Love Island, and Married at First Sight. I was struck at how often the term gaslighting was used in the last season of Married at First Sight, a show that consumed me for more than I'd care to admit. It can take a long time to get beneath the use of these terms, which may be described as a defense mechanism, and explore someone's deeper, more vulnerable emotional experiences. This relies on building a safe, trusting relationship, but we don't often have time. For many people, long-term therapy is unaffordable.
Wow. Well, I really do like how they've kind of reiterated what we've said in past episodes about, like, this is where people go to get their insights. It really is reality TV and YouTube and all of those things. And I also really liked how she said, you know, this therapy speak, psychobabble, whatever. It's like, doesn't even come close to what therapy really is. And it really is like about every relationship between therapist and client is different and nuanced. People want different things. Like, there's boundaries in place. Like, it's all so, you know, it's safe, and it should be if it's done the right way. And it's just about that relationship and having open conversations. And it's like interesting. It's like you think about therapists going to school. It's like, you know, is gaslighting one of their vocab words to memorize, like to study for the test? You know, it's like these are tools, and it's like people are, I don't know. It's kind of crazy, like how far people take things and run with it. But I feel like everyone's ultimately saying the same thing, for it's like, it's not bad that people are, because it's good to be curious. Like, it's better than when people didn't give a fuck, or like what Esther Perel said, like, it was like no one would talk about it, you know? And I feel like that keeps happening, bro. Like, I feel like we keep doing like good things intentionally, maybe, but we just blow it out of proportion. And again, it's like, don't blame TikTok. Like, it's just a byproduct of our society. But it's a little insane. It's like we've never been so disconnected and lonely as a society, but at the same time, it's like we're all like so connected by like these platforms like TikTok and like all over the world. It's like everyone knows like what this shit is. Like, it's really like matrixy to think about.
Yeah, it really is, because it's like on one side it's so good, and we're going to get into a little bit more about the case for using it after, but like at the same time it can be weaponized and all these things. And like the part about that article that I particularly like the most is like talking about it as like a mask, right? Like, you're using this language because it's what you know, it's what you hear, it's what you pick up on social media, and you're like, oh, this is what it is. And I think I've had in therapy like a particular problem that I realized only through being with an actual therapist that's telling me I'm doing something wrong, or asking those questions to go deeper of like, what is the deeper emotion under this? Like, oh, you use this term. Okay, what's under that? I'm scared. I'm sad.
Yeah.
I haven't sat with my emotions. And I am someone who likes to intellectualize like things a lot. And I think a lot of people like to, you know, point out a diagnosis or cling to this term or reference this because it puts what they're feeling into this like tangible box that they almost don't have to feel it anymore because it's outside of them. And I feel that so hard. Like, that feels a lot better in the moment than actually sitting with yourself and being like, I'm sad. And like a lot of us as a generation, like, we joke about mental health and trauma and triggers and all this stuff so much because it is more talked about, it's more accessible, and I think that's a really good thing. But I think our generation is also very good at distancing ourselves from our actual internal emotional experiences because we're so plugged in, because we always have, you know, something to fix it. Like, even when I talk about cigarettes, how I use them as an emotional crutch, like a stress reliever, whatever, that's not actually fixing the problem.
Right.
When you go on TikTok and you're looking up attachment styles and like, it's providing this way for you to think through this experience that you're having, but you're not journaling and considering like the internal emotion that's manifesting.
And it's almost like you're tricking yourself. Like you're using the language, you're watching the stuff, like you feel like you're tapped into your emotions. I know what my attachment style is, but you're not. And at the end of the day, it's like, what else is there more to say at the fact that therapy is just not affordable? Like, what is a bitch to do? Like, what are people supposed to do? So, I don't know. It's like that's why it's like, well, thank God someone's there. Like, thank God we're finally talking about it. Yeah. But I think it's going to take time for people to understand everything of what you just said, of like knowing, you know, what this type of content and this type of therapy speak trending stuff is doing to us. And also like one other thing from Esther Perel's section, like I struggle with this a lot. Like she was like, you know, we're just thinking about ourselves, not the community, because I felt like in order to heal, like I had to go like the whole other direction and be like, no, I'm just going to put me first. And I feel like a lot of people relate to that. And I know it's a very, like, American, individualistic, like, myself over everyone, because, like, you hear about, like, different cultures. It's like, that's not how it is. Like, everything is so community and, like, family is everything. But here it really is. Like, I feel like just, like, growing up here, like, being a white person, it's like, it's just me all the time.
Yeah.
And so, and I've, like, you know, given advice to other people. I'm like, no, cut them off. Like, you are the most important person at the end of the day. And you are, but it's like over time, like all this me on top and cutting these people off, like it is isolating you even further. Like, yes, it's okay to cut people off sometimes, but like, I feel like it becomes like, I just need to put myself first. And if I just don't even like 20% of your energy, so we're not hanging out anymore, you know?
Right. You need community to like fuel you and feed you. And also like, I think service and like helping other people is something that you should consider when you are healed and stuff like that. Like how a lot of people go to their friends and family. Like I think sometimes I've been caught in the same cycle where I'm like, oh, I need to focus on healing myself and I can't be around these people because they're not healed yet. But it's like no,
we're
like
projecting
maybe
almost.
Yeah, we're projecting, and it's like maybe like I don't need to like spend my time trying to fix these people, but like it's helpful to still engage with those people who are still on their healing journey, and I still am too, you know, and like offer advice or like listen to them from their perspective. Like it should be a give and take.
I know.
You can't just create a bubble.
Because that is such a thing too. It's like if someone's not in therapy or they're not on their healing shit, it's like, oh, red flag, you know?
Yep.
But it's like everyone is going to get there within their own time. And it is like, it's not a bad thing to want someone that's like been to therapy, but it's like not everyone has the chance. Like people do it in different ways. Like it's not like therapy's the only way you can heal. If you have access to it, definitely go. But like there are other ways too, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's like reading, community groups, like I don't really know, but you know, there are other ways. There were times before therapists and bitches were definitely depressed, like, you know?
Yeah.
So we asked you guys the poll, why do you think people overuse therapy speak? And 45% said it's become so common. 35% said they don't know what it really means. 17% said to be controlling, and 3% said for self-care. I definitely feel like the top two, they don't know what it really means and it's become so common, like go hand in hand. And I only voted for it's become so common because I think some people do know what it means. I don't think not anyone knows what it means. Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
But are these people making TikToks like correcting people? No, like they're just not tapped in like that. So it's like, it can feel like everyone thinks this certain way. But it's like, those are the creators, though. It's like, what about the commenters? What about the people on the app, like, watching the content? So I don't think it's like no one knows what it means. I know that people do. And, like, I hope maybe it could be 50-50. I don't know. But I think most of it is just, it's become so common. It's like we're all just, like, parrots and, like, we hear shit and, like, boom. it's done.
We use it. Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's interesting that only 3% said for self-care.
Yeah, I know. And that was like a last minute decision. You're like, hey,
yeah,
cool,
right.
guys.
I was like, all right. So next we're going to get into the case for therapy speak. And the common thread I saw throughout all of these articles that we've been using is that we don't own this language and it's different for everybody. So I'm going to go through all of these articles, then we'll talk about it. So the first one, how therapy speak affects relationships, when therapy speak can help our relationships, makes the case that therapy helps you get to know yourself better and reflect on how to make choices that are more consistent with your values and goals, says McHugh, who's a therapist. It can help you get clear about what you're looking for in relationships, challenge your defensiveness, and listen better. In other words, therapy is really helpful if you're struggling to know what you want out of your relationships. It can help you figure out how much energy you want to give to others and how much energy you expect to receive in return. Therapy speak in the context of therapy can be especially helpful. When you and your professional are in the safe space talking through some of these words and how they apply to your life, that's when therapy speak is the best used. Therapy speak can also destigmatize mental health. If you found a word that makes you feel like you finally have an answer to something you've been experiencing your whole life, you can feel empowered to use that language. I think it's important that people are speaking openly about their mental health challenges and connecting to other people with similar experiences, McHugh said. Bottom line, when we use it carefully and in context, therapeutic language is definitely useful. And then the next one is from that same New Yorker article, and the author, Katie Waldron, said, one concern that I expected to hear was that the mass adoption of psychological speech might disservice people with severe mental illnesses. Wasn't it disrespectful to toss around terms like trauma, depression that can imply so much suffering? Where was the line between unraveling a taboo and draining a word of its value? The psychologist I spoke to surprised me. Steeped in a counter history of silence about the vilification of mental illness, they could not bring themselves, it seemed, to worry about this particular aspect of therapy speak's rise. Gottlieb, who we mentioned before, pointing to a cottage industry of drinking memes on social media, noted that most of us are still much more likely to minimize mental health challenges, including addiction, than to exaggerate them. And although Saxby allowed that there is a danger of pathologizing and treating, she found both modes preferable to fear and shame. If I, meaning, the writer, was once suspicious of the language budding across my social media feeds, lamenting its expansion now feels like making a claim about who exactly mental health is for and what we'd like it to do. We could say that it's for individuals who struggle with its opposite, but in that case, the language of healing will always be the language of difference. And if we say that it's for those who have traditionally spoken of such things, we restrict well-meaning to a milieu of people who can afford it. And then lastly, we have the Guardian article, which said, however, writing all this down, like this is from the perspective of the writer, makes me think, what right do I have to assume passport control for certain words? The language of healing or surviving will look different for everyone. It's complex. Could the expansion of this language speak to a collective hunger for a framework that helps us talk about our existence in modern society? That is, trying to feel peaceful, purposeful, and connected while many structural forces collide and make that existence feel harder and harder. There's no clear solution other than make the world easier to live in, but a therapist might tell you that's magical thinking.
What I've gathered from all of this is really that it's interesting that on one hand, we have a generation that's so vocal about their trauma and about all these things and using these words and like thinking about things critically, maybe to an extent. And then at the same time, it's like we are still in a place where people don't take mental health that seriously.
Yeah.
And I forget who said that. But it's like, how can those things like exist at the same time? And then I was thinking like, well, maybe a lot of it's just like performative. And if like this is the culture, like these are the things we're saying, like these are the words we're using to describe certain situations now. It's like you kind of just like hop on that without even maybe consciously like making that choice,
Yeah.
And like that really sucks because it's like you think about it, it's like people, and maybe it's because it's more normalized to go on TikTok and hear someone say like a very traumatic real story that happened to them. So it's like we're kind of taking it seriously, but not as much because there's so much of it. And it's like you think, well, everyone has trauma to a certain extent. Yeah. So it's like we're not, I don't know. It's weird.
Well, yeah, because we used to minimize mental health like so much, and we still do a lot. Right. And I think older generations still do, especially like within themselves. And I saw like funny memes and videos about Gen X and how they're like, they would say some really fucking traumatic shit, and you're like we're looking at them, our parents' generation, like, you need to go to therapy for that. But they're not like, they're like, oh, I went through this and da-da-da, like, I'm still okay. And you're like, that's not a good thing.
Right.
You know? So, like, there's that part of, like, society and those generations that are like, oh, you just push through it. You just push through it. And then there's our generation that's more like, no, we need to use therapy speak. We need to do this. We need to pay attention to this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, maybe we're somewhere in between, but we need to, like, be destigmatizing this language and using all of it to get to a better place. And it's almost like if language is a tool, like we need more language, like how we said at the beginning, like there's a difference between a bad experience and trauma. And like we're at a place in learning and destigmatizing mental health where we're like, okay, you can't, in our trauma dumping episode, we're like, we never want to say this isn't trauma because for everybody it's different, and who am I to say? Like, and I think that's a very like mental healthy therapistized way of looking at things, is to not like insert yourself into someone else's experience because you're not experiencing it. But at the same time, that is kind of a question, and I feel like it's okay to ask that because it does like have the opposite effect to people. Like even how I'm talking about like my situation with the triggers and stuff like that. Like even in myself as someone who's experienced it, I've had a hard time identifying what's really a trigger and what's just a negative emotional response.
Yeah, 1,000%.
So it's like,
and I don't know. The other part that confuses me too is like the humor piece, because like we talked about in the trauma episode with the candy bowls and like what Katie Waldman said in the New Yorker article about like the memes, like it minimizes it, but it's also like, I do think like maybe because like we're a generation that was like, we're like in these social media times, it's like different for us. Like I do think people do cope well with humor, and like when I see someone like post something funny about something they've been through and I relate to it, like I'm like, I feel good. Like I'm like, oh, it's like community. So I think it's hard. It's like we can't even just have that, because then you have the overall impact and now we're minimizing it. Like it's exhausting, you know? Yeah. But I do agree that it minimizes it to a certain extent. But I think coping with humor in that sense and building community like is one of the, like TikTok is just a funny, silly app at the end of the day. So it's like maybe that's what it should be, to like it should have that space to be that. But then you think about where access to therapy is so hard and everyone's getting things from social media and reality TV. So it's like we do want to have actual providers on there too then, because if that's all where people can go and they just see these funny trauma memes, it's like not serious. And if someone's really struggling in that moment, they might not think it's funny, you know? But if it's like past and you've healed from it, then it's funnier. But it's like someone in crisis is not really going to relate to that. And it's like, not saying TikTok needs to be like a crisis center, but it's just like that is the effect like on the community that we're all doing this for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because both are existing on the same platform. Like, it's like funny whatever stuff, and then it's also educational stuff, and then it's also shared experiences. Like, you have all of this coexisting in this. And, like, the thing with the funny humor stuff, too, like, how much of it is a defense mechanism. Because, like, that was one of the biggest things that I pulled from this whole thing, like, that really that was different than what I was thinking about it, is the whole idea of using it as a defense mechanism. And I think we use humor as a defense mechanism a lot, and particularly our generation with Gen X as our parents and all of them who like it was more stigmatized and didn't go to therapy. I think that's a natural response for us to be like, haha, my trauma, because like it wasn't taken as seriously with our parents' generation and all of that stuff. So, like, we are taking it more seriously. But at the same time, our generation as a whole, I think because of social media and everything else, like we did all the like cute Instagram pictures, but now we're going back to a time of like making fun of ourselves, and we don't want to take anything too seriously.
Yes.
So like, we're taking it seriously, but we're not. Like there's always a layer of like removal that's going on there, because things that are too serious feel like too much. So
and then you're being cringe if you take it too seriously.
Right.
Like it really is a whole cycle. It's like we don't know how to have a healthy balance as a collective. And I know that's a huge ask, but like I do believe one day it could be possible. Like I feel like we talked about the beauty pendulum in the episode a few weeks ago about beauty obsession. It's like the pendulum, it's like we can't, either we're like gonna use this therapy speak and we're gonna make it funny and we're gonna go all out, or it's like there's nothing and everyone should be embarrassed, you know? There's no like happy medium, and it's hard. It's a big ask.
And it should be nuanced, right? Like we can't reasonably think that every single person should just immediately stop using boundaries in the wrong context.
Like it's never gonna happen.
It's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I think like one of our goals in even having this podcast, and we're educating ourselves because like we didn't know before we did this episode.
It's like the people that like aren't necessarily using these things in a bad, like they're not actively doing anything harmful, but it's like they're not thinking about it, so they're falling like the wave and they're falling victim. It's like those people need to have their minds changed and be like thinking critically, and then it won't seem like everyone blah blah blah. But it's like no one's thinking about it, and bitch, I the fuck wouldn't be either if we didn't have this platform.
If we didn't have the podcast.
Promise you.
Exactly.
So it's difficult.
Yeah. So next, I want to just do a quick little conversation about are we having too much therapy? So I listened to this podcast episode by Critics at Large by The New Yorker, and it's called The Therapy Episode. And they had like a whole conversation about a bunch of things. But like towards the end, there was a part that stuck out to me. And one of the hosts was talking about, how there's clearly a massive mental health situation going on in our culture. And it's good that people are seeking help. But then she mentioned this article about how to break up with your therapist. And she was like, great, guys, this should not go on forever. Freud himself believed that therapy should come to an end. In fact, the way he encouraged that this be done is by charging for sessions. That is actually the part of Freudian psychoanalysis that you are supposed to pay for sessions, because you are supposed to feel like this is treatment that you're investing in and that your funds may run out. So chop, time to get better. And I feel like this can be looked at in two senses, right? Because it's like, like the case, like we're talking about access, we're talking about money. All of that is so real. And especially when we talk about like classism, capitalism, like different communities, LGBTQ, Black communities, Asian, people of color, all of that stuff, like getting access is a whole conversation, and cost should be discussed. But then there's also a difference versus someone who can like afford therapy and just goes to therapy forever and just constantly relies on it and is never getting better. And I've thought about that too. I'm not going to lie. Going to therapy once a month versus every week, I really
feel like...
I feel it. And I feel like it's had a good effect on me though, in the sense where it's like, I have to sit with things for longer and really think about what I'm going to talk to my therapist about next time I see her. And the goal
it's like one meeting.
You gotta be, instead of like, oh, this is how my week was, like we're just catching up,
So, I know. You take it for granted, dude.
You take it for granted.
And like, I used to pay the copay, but my mom's insurance was good. It was nothing.
Yep, exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I really was that like privileged, like, oh, well, I'm going.
Same. Yeah.
And I think like as I approached like 25, 24 is when it started. I used to like, I don't know. I would not like, I always took it serious because I knew that I needed it, but it was like, my health insurance is going to run out. Like you do feel that. And therapy should not be forever. It really shouldn't. And it's like, I think going in waves has worked for me. And I don't think you're ever at a point where it's like, you're good. But I do think to a certain extent, like unless you go through something like that you didn't think was going to happen or whatever, like enough is enough at some point. Like you have to, the whole point is to get the tools to do it on your own. So it's like, and it's, if you want to have a therapist forever, it's like you need that extra support. It's like, that's fine too. But I do think it's a beautiful thing to be able to sit with yourself and say, okay, I did therapy for 10 years or even 4 years. And like, I feel different. I took it really seriously and like, not, I'm good, but I feel better equipped to take on life's problems than I did before.
Yeah, exactly. And there's seasons,
and I
right?
do kind of feel that low key, like definitely, like the more you have the conversations, but this is just so privileged that I've been able to go for so long. And it's like, it's really not relatable to most people to have that situation, maybe in the bubbles of where we grew up or like went to school. And throwback to, you know, I used to use up the high school counselors too, bitch. Like I would go. I would go. And I went to public school. Like that shit was free.
Yeah, that's good though. That's a good.
I would go.
I never even thought of that back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. Like I think, you know, for something like
thank
how you
God
talk about like your eating disorder and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're out of therapy now, but like in the future, like it's seasons, right? Like if a lot of people in adulthood, when they like lose a parent or something, they go through the grieving process and then they want a therapist again. Like it's situational. And I think if you have like major depressive disorder, bipolar, if you have like schizophrenia or something like that, that's like a lot more serious and you need someone to be there for you like more often.
Care, consistent care.
Yeah, that's a different story. But like I've been thinking about that more lately because it's like ideally like I've come a long way in like healing from my abusive relationship. But at one point, like I don't want that to be the thing anymore. Like the goal is to like heal from that as much as possible and then remove that as part of my like everyday feeling, identity, emotions, whatever. Like I'll go through other bad shit in the future, but like I don't want to be talking about this and how it affects me for the rest of my life. I don't want to use it as a crutch.
Yeah.
Like I want to get beyond it.
And I think that's the point. I think
and I think that's what's removed from a lot of this like TikTok, podcast, YouTube stuff is like people like cling to it and stay in this cycle and don't think about like actually like using it to their benefit and moving on from situations.
Right.
It's more just like, oh, like this is the language. This is what I'm always using. Yeah. This is how I am.
It's almost like astrology, bitch. It's like not all the time. Like, and not everything. Like, it's like, it's one of those things. It's not something to live by. It's like providing insight. Like even like the attachment theory shit. Like I'm not going to lie. Like sometimes it pisses me off. Like we didn't do an episode about them, right?
No, we
were going
We've talked
to.
about it. We've
now
talked
I
about
don't
it
want
other,
to because I'm just like,
I know because I felt like I see so much content about it and it has a lot to do with situations.
It's like
right?
your
Because,
sign
like,
now.
One person is avoidant, one person's anxious. That's the common pair, like whatever. But like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's fluid. Like, it depends. Like,
and it's not bad. Like, it's not bad. But again, it's just too much. Like, it's too much of it. And it's an identification where it should be like a private tool, insight thing that you talk about with your partner or your therapist, your mom, grandma, whoever. Like, it's not like to put that on your dating profile is crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and some people do it to be cute, like anxious girly looking for her secure man. But like,
it's like that, you're solidifying yourself to this point of like, to me, that reads as like you're not trying to grow together. You're like, oh, I'm gonna text you all the time because I'm anxious attached.
Yeah,
like,
that's
no. You should be working on that to like try.
That's
to
why you learn is so you can see what you need to work on, and not even to benefit other people to be happier. Like that's not fun to be like that, and it's okay that you are. It's valid as fuck. Like obviously, all if not many relate to all of these things, and it's real stuff. But it's like therapists never are like, okay, my client is this, so every time she does this, I'm just like, oh, well, it's because you're anxiously attached. Like, it's a reason, but it's like, it's supposed to just like help you, not define you and have you rabbit holing and trying to find like it really is like astrology. Like, I don't date Scorpios. Like, I don't date this type of attachment style. Like, it's just, it's too much.
It's too much. We need to take a deep breath. But we did ask you guys Have you ever been to therapy? And I think it was really telling that 53% of you guys said not right now, but I have in the past. 36 are still in therapy right now currently. 10% aren't but want to be, and only 1% said no, I don't want to, I don't need it.
Damn. So like everyone's in therapy or has been.
But the majority was at a point, and I hope to believe, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with finances and stuff like that, but I hope to believe that people are using it, you know, to a point to get over to something, to grow as a person, and then go out into the world and like continue to live their life and like whatever, you know?
Yeah. I think it's so unfortunate, but I think a lot of it is the finances. And like the earlier poll too, it's like hard to find someone that you fucking like, and you get tired because it's not free to have a consultation. You hate them and you spent however much, like it's annoying, and then you get discouraged. Like I've been there. Like it's really fucking hard, and that's why when you do find one, you get attached to them hard because you're like, no one else is gonna be like, and it's like
they get you, and
and then someone also submitted a story and said, one of the reasons I don't do therapy is because my best friend is a social worker. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know what this means. Like,
me neither.
I don't know if it means like their best friend's a social worker, so like they're like they talk to them about stuff, or their best friend's a social worker, so they know the insides and outs of shit. But either way, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, because like you shouldn't expect your friend to like be your therapist for you, and also like, but maybe it's like they don't use therapy speak because of I don't know. That one was a little confusing.
Yeah, it was a little confusing, but either way, thank you for listening and submitting a story.
Yeah. So that about does it for like everything in this episode. We are going to wrap up though with everything that we talked about, talking about what we're wet, dry, and still a little bit confused about the topic. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll go first. First of all, I just want to say for my wet, I'm definitely so grateful that I've had the opportunity to see different therapists and like have a lot of one-on-one time with professionals that have really, really helped me and definitely changed my life 1000%, and have helped me so much through things that I've gone through, and just, you know, human things too, that everyone just kind of needs someone to talk to about different shit. But yeah, I mean, I am, as much as it's like things are detrimental and problematic, like I don't want to discard the fact that this generation has done wonders for mental health, and I am really grateful and wet that people are talking about it and naming it, because going from it being a secret to this really is, you know, revolutionary in a sense, because it's way better now.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
and I'm wet about all the community that people find from this type of content online, and the times where it really did help someone, or you really thought that you were the only one that ever experienced that and that changed it for you. I mean, there's a lot to be wet about here. I think the fact that it's all just so about me, and like it's like this therapy speak is about me though, is what turns you off. But at the end of the day, like I do think there's a lot to be said about how these conversations are so much more common. It's not like crazy to hear about it. And so many podcasts have mental health check-ins. How are you mentally? Like it is a lot of wet within that. But I think it's just like people really take things too far, and that's what makes you feel like it's all dry. But I'm trying to remind myself that, you know, and with the mental health stats that you read, it's like we need this. Like we need people to talk about it. That is what we were fighting for so long before, and now that we are, and it's not perfect, it's problematic. So it's like I do want to give ourselves grace and like give credit where credit is due, you know?
Yeah, 100% same. Like I'm very grateful to have a therapist now, to have had others in the past. Like it is a privilege, unfortunately, you know, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. And same, I'm definitely wet too about like the destigmatization of everything. Like these conversations, just thinking about like our parents, grandparents' generation, like they didn't have this language, these tools, unless you like had gone to a psychiatric hospital, you were in recovery for addiction, like something so serious.
Right.
Everything else, and even if it was serious, sometimes they weren't able to get the help or have access to something as easy as like TikTok, where you can open up your phone and like be hit with some sort of helpful advice, which is better than nothing. So I definitely think that that's huge. I'm also I think about the ways that people are overall acknowledging how relationships can be healthy or unhealthy and how to set boundaries and all of that stuff, even though I think the way that people are going about it is a little iffy. They're using therapy speak. It is very like me centered and all of those things.
Yeah.
But I think because of all this therapy, mental health stuff coming into the conversation, at least people are kind of looking at the relationships around them, looking at hopefully how they engage with other people, and finding the language, the power, the courage, or whatever to prioritize their mental health, hopefully build community, all of those things to have like more of a better community and better way to deal with each other versus just like not acknowledging it at all. So what about that?
Exactly. I think for dry, I mean, as dry as it is, that a lot of these conversations online are becoming problematic because they're not using the correct definitions of certain therapy speak terms or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's not surprising that this happened because there was no like lack of education to support any of this. So it's like we wanted people to talk about mental health for so long. It's like, well, this is the first step. Like no one was ready. But I do think it has a lot of potential to go up from here, 1,000%. And also for dry, like we didn't talk about this a lot because it is like less common, but I do hate like when like people kind of use it manipulatively, like, oh, well, that's my boundary. And specifically when men do it and we did talk about it a little bit, but it's just like, I hate that shit. Like people maliciously using this to like get what they want is like crazy. I mean, if someone's doing it unintentionally, it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
But people that are like using it to like clap back is crazy. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's scary. Like I think a lot of the people online that are mental health influencers, quote unquote, but don't have any education or training, I think that's one of the scariest parts about it too, because no matter how many good ones, quote unquote, there are, like Esther Perel or whoever, it's like people are gonna find the ones that it'll be detrimental, and then it just like it's like it feeds it like fire, and then that person watching that content says it to their friend and their cousin and then their uncle, and it's like it just like it spirals out of control. So it is problematic, but like I said, it's like it's not surprising. Like people don't know what to do with this new type of language that we were all put onto. So it's scary, but I'm like, I keep going back and forth. I'm like, it's more wet, it's more dry, but I think it's all just like super balanced. I really
it's nuanced. And like Teal Swan is someone who I think of that does a lot of mental health content that's like bordering on a cult and stuff like that. So that's where it can get scary too.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely dry overall about the mental health crisis, the therapy shortage, all of that stuff. Like you see why people are seeking out like these online resources. So like I'm dry about the access, and also within that, when people are misusing it, which I think it's understandable to be misusing it, I'm dry about the fact that that exists because of education around it. Like, I always go back to this with every fucking topic that we cover, but it's like, we have education on fucking pre-calc and algebra. Why aren't we having an education class about, like, fucking mental health?
What? Like, it's actually insane, bro.
Crazy.
Unless you want to be a mathematician or whatever, but...
Yeah, like, the social sciences, psychology, the ways we relate to other people, like relationships, all of this stuff, I think it should have a place in public education.
I know.
And when it doesn't, this is what manifests, because you can't, once you get out of like public education, 12th grade or whatever, people aren't going to college as much anymore. People can educate themselves on YouTube, but it's not fact-checked. Not to say that everything you learn in public school is 100% gospel.
Right.
But
like,
the
internet can't be it. Like, there has to be some in-person teaching something. Whether it's an event, a class, anything. Like, it doesn't even need to be school. Like, something.
Yeah, especially for like the people you're talking about, like men who use boundaries as a way to like control
Police women,
people,
yeah.
and gaslighters who use the term gaslighting, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So like
Like,
yeah, I'm definitely dry about that. I also am dry consistently because I think it's come up in other episodes when we talked about dating paranoia and stuff too, how people are distancing themselves from their own emotions and looking for the next like quick fix, or like using this tool as a defense mechanism, like all of that type of stuff, because I think our generation really has that problem with being in tune and sitting with ourselves. So like definitely dry about that.
Yeah. And for confused, like, I do think, like, a solution to a lot of this is, like, what we were talking about towards the beginning of, like, not just, like, taking this content as end-all, be-all and, like, encouraging people to think about it for themselves, too. So it's, like, whether that means, you know, creators consistently say that more, like, but this, you know, it doesn't always apply to you. Or it's, like, you know, there's more, you limit yourself more on how much content that you watch. Like, you don't have all this screen time where it's just constant. You know, there are ways to go around that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really difficult. And, like, the humor piece confuses me, too, because I really think it's such a double-edged sword. It does so much good, but also bad at the same time. And I do think, like, the answer is just, like, generations are going to have to pass. And I do think this is, like, one of the first, like, you know, movement, decade, 5 years, whatever you want to say, where mental health, like, is taking off, where it's talked about a lot more and taken into consideration a lot more, like mental health days and all that shit. Like, that was not a thing before. Like, that was laughable, like, to our parents or our aunts or whoever. So it's, I don't know. I think it's like there's not a lot we can do individually besides like protect ourselves and like have the right types of conversations with our friends where we're not just like going off of what these therapists said online or even your therapist in real life, but like allowing yourself to think about it for you too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And just not being so hurt by shit too. Like, a lot of this is like, you understand that you're hurting someone, but it's like, just try to think about, like, everyone is looking out for themselves at the end of the day. And I think people just get so hurt by things. And it's like, it's easy to, obviously, but I just think that's a confusing part too. It's like, it's really all just, when you think about people move based on what they need to do for themselves and their own perspective, like, they're not thinking about you 24/7. Like, it doesn't always have to do with you. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we could all think about other people more and then also less. Like, it's about when to.
Exactly, because the community versus self thing, too. Like, bro, that conversation fucks me up.
Yeah, that's a whole fucking paradox. But, yeah, I think same, everything you said for confused. I think also some of these terms and like the way that I'm using them, the way other people are, like, we defined some of them and got into it, but there are so many. And I think because of this podcast, because we're talking about sex, relationships, and personal identity, these are terms that are going to consistently come up in some of the stuff that we're doing. Like, we bring in stuff from therapists, we bring in like relationship dynamics, all of that stuff. So like, one of the things I'm a little confused about and I want to be really careful about is like how I'm using those terms. And like, it's so hard. Again, like, therapy speak is like English, like Spanish, like it is its own language used as a tool to talk about these things. But especially as like influencers, podcast people that are in the space of trying to help people consider how they're dealing with their personal identity, their relationships, their sex lives, whatever. Like, I do realize we have a responsibility. So that's a little bit of extra pressure in terms of like considering how we're using it. And I'm a little confused about how to do all of that.
Yeah, like, what have I said in the past before this episode?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
Triggered, like, ew, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that about does it for this episode, guys. I hope you liked it. Let us know what you thought in the comments, or you can always email us or DM us. Like I said, we post polls for every single episode on our Instagram story, so make sure you're following us at So Wet So Dry. We definitely really want you to be a part of that conversation and bring you into the episodes. Whatever platform y'all are on, remember to subscribe, follow, like the episode. Like I said, leave a comment. We love engaging with y'all in the comments, especially on YouTube. It's been, really, It's been y'all have been active in the comment sections on YouTube, and we love that so much. And yeah, thanks for listening.
And yes, no matter what platform you guys are listening on, we do have listener support through Spotify. It's 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99 a month. And it is in the bottom of the description of every single episode, no matter what platform you guys are listening. It really helps us. Right now, we're not making any fucking money. We just do this because we love it. We're learning with
I'm about to go work a shift, guys.
Right,
till midnight.
exactly.
Like, I literally want to cry right now. But we're all in this together. We got this.
We're all in it together. But we love you guys so much. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.
Bye.
Honestly, since, I don't know, I guess maybe 15 or 16, when I found out kind of like what Playboy is, I've been like in love and obsessed just with the idea of being like nude and feeling still sexy and confident and beautiful.
It's just so exciting because I see the potential in this, and not only that, modeling has always been a dream of mine for a long time, ever since I could remember, and I always felt like I was never confident enough, and I never knew how I would even get my foot in the door.
I made record labels so much money off my body. I made a lot of people so much money off my body, and I got the smallest cut off my own body and my own work and my own ideas. And I don't think I have to say sorry about the fact that I want to commodify my own It's been commodified, and I wasn't even the main benefactor of it, so this.